Okay, so it's 6:31. I'm calling the special meeting of the San Leandro City Council to order. Today is Monday, July 10th. And let's see, who wants to lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance? Vice Mayor. Allegiance to the flag. Okay, Madam Clerk, would you please take roll?
Councilmember Aguilar.
Present.
Councilmember Baloo.
Present.
Councilmember Bowen. Councilmember Reynes.
Present.
Councilmember Simon is absent. Vice Mayor Azevedo. Mayor Gonzalez.
Present.
All members are present except for Councilmember Simon.
At this point in time, would you please read your announcement? Then I'll have a couple of announcements.
Yes. Public comment will be taken from those participating in person first, then on Zoom. If you wish to speak during public comment and are attending the meeting in person, please fill out a speaker card and hand it to the city clerk. To participate in public comment via Zoom, when the item is called, use the raise your hand tool or press *9 if calling from a phone. Speakers will be asked to unmute and invited to speak. You will have 2 minutes to speak and a countdown timer will appear for your convenience. When the timer is up, you may complete your sentence, then the microphone will be muted. To avoid confusion, all hands raised outside of public comment periods will be lowered. Thank you.
At this point in time, I'd like to just note that welcome Councilmember Reynes back from maternity leave. It's good to have you here at the dais. I will also be seeking to move the consent calendar items after our recognitions, as we have been doing for the last couple of months. Looking to my council to see if there are any concerns about moving, rejiggering the agenda. Seeing no objections, we will make that happen. At this point in time, let's move to recognitions, please. So the first item is a recognition of Lynn Drogo. Right here. Start with this.
One of my team.
All right. It's awesome. So I'm gonna let you hold that. You can read along if you'd like. And then, as always, the kindness.
Oh,
Good attitude. Something you sell at the store, you can ask for more. Okay, so here we go. Thank you for all that you have done. The certificate, the commendation reads as follows. So it's presented to Lynn for her servant heart and in recognition of her impact in the community, and that it reaches far and wide. As the selfless hands-on founder of the nonprofit organization Teen Advocacy Going Strong, TAGS, Lynn invested her own money to ensure that teens have a haven and that dozens of people have stable income, especially those lacking prior job experience. So for your dedication, for your kindness, thank you for what you've done for our city.
thank you. Good evening. Thanks to council members and Mayor Gonzalez for this, and to Sam Fair for nominating me. I'm proud to be the founder of TAGS, an essential dedicated community space for local teens and young adults, which is one of our priority populations according to our San Leandro gap assessment. How many of you have felt the weight of depression, stress, and anxiety on young people today? We've all likely encountered it. So I want to share how TAGS addresses this and highlight one of our teen employees, Brian. TAGS is so much more than a quirky little thrift store on East 14th Street. I founded TAGS because I saw an urgent need to have a safe space for our young people, one that fosters creativity, resilience, and connection. We host free creative workshops. We offer opportunities for employment, and we design artistic programs around themes like advocacy and environmentalism. We empower young teens to showcase their talents and ideas, express themselves authentically, and embark on a journey of personal growth alongside their peers. We know creativity can play a significant role in mental health, and as so can social connection and community support. 2 years ago, Brian moved here from El Salvador and soon after walked into TAGS for a workshop. A few months later, he led a workshop and joined the teen staff. He also showcases his artwork where he explores his connection to nature, artistic traditions of unrepresented communities, and his own culture and personal identity. Through his work at TAGS, Brian inspires others to embrace their journeys. And on August 6th, Brian will have his first solo exhibition at TAGS. We hope you all will come. So if this resonates with you, there are many ways to contribute. Join TAGS in empowering and uplifting teens. Together, let's nurture their well-being. With your support, TAGS can make a lasting impact and change young lives for the better. Thank you.
We've got our official photographer here, and then we'll come around and everybody get the picture? Yeah, right here.
Bobby.
Perfect. Thank you. And I can tell you that they've got some awesome stuff that I've seen. The creativity is quite empowering. So I'm very excited about that recognition. So now we're going to call up Peter DeQuincy and Justin Lamb. Are you here? There you are. And Victoria Bammer also, and Sam Fitting. My goodness, we got a whole bunch of people. Come on down. Okay, so let's see. So I've got one for Youth Advisory. And then my words from the proclamation. Okay, so I'm going to read some of this. This is all about National Park and Recreation Month. Super important, right? That we get out there and we exercise these bodies, and it's good for not only our physical health, but our mental health. So whereas parks and recreation are an integral part of communities throughout the country, including the city of San Leandro, and whereas parks and recreation promote health and well-being and wellness and improve the physical and mental health of people, and whereas parks and recreation promote time spent in nature and provide space for physical activity, for sports, for hiking, for swimming, and many other activities designed to promote active lifestyles. And whereas our parks and natural recreation areas ensure ecological beauty in our community and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and to recreate outdoors. And whereas our Parks and Recreation Department is a leading provider of healthy meals, nutrition services, and education, now, therefore, I, Juan Gonzalez, the 3rd Mayor of San Leandro, do proclaim the month of July. That's awesome. As Park and Recreation Month in the city of San Leandro. Want to say a word or two? Yeah, sure. Say a word or two.
Yeah, Pete DeQuincy. I am one of the commissioners for the Recreation and Park Commission. And I just want to remind the group that access to parks is integral in the health, physical, and mental well-being of our residents. As the saying goes with California Parks and Rec Society and NRPA, which is National Recreation Park Association, parks make life better. And as a reminder, sometimes that goes unnoticed of our recreation professionals of what they do to provide for our communities, for our seniors, for our children, when it comes to recreation, kids camps, access to the water, swimming, and for our youth and teenagers. And I cannot thank them enough for the job they do that sometimes goes unnoticed. But here in the commission, we notice that, and we want to remind our city of the integral part they play and the benefits they provide.
We're going to take a picture, please. One for that. Parks do make life better. Yes. Thank you, guys. So at this point in time, we'll move to our consent calendar. So is there any discussion, an item that council would like to pull from the consent calendar? Or do I have a motion otherwise to move the consent calendar? Okay, Councilmember Aguilar, please.
I'd like to move the consent calendar.
Thank you. Councilmember Bowen.
I'd like to second.
Okay, so I have a motion by Councilmember Aguilar and a second by Councilmember Bowen. Do we have public comment on this item?
Yes, Mayor, we have one public comment item from Chris Bammer in person, and I will see if there's public comment online.
Yep.
Right now, there are no hands up online.
Chris Bammer, resident for 25 years. My parents have owned a business here since 1977. I want to congratulate Lynn Drago. I was in Leadership San Leandro, best class ever, 2020. She does great things for the community, and she's had high expectations, and I think she's getting a lot of them. Parks and recreations, I spoke last time. All these things do make it better. Providing space for sports, hiking, trails, swimming pools, designed to promote active lifestyles. Swimming pools, the Manor swimming pool, we would like to use it. That would be some income, some revenue for the city also. I would think that maybe we should spend some money and get it fixed. I know it's not real hot in the summer, but I want to know 3199 Alvarado Street. I'm confused with this legislation details. It says 1.974 acres of outside storage, facility for animals. Location parallels the City of San Leandro's corporation yard on Chapman Road. 3199 is not close to Chapman Road. And 3199 Alvarado is a 250,000 square foot building sitting on 15 acres. I drove through it today. It already looks like a mess. So we're not talking about renting this building for $1 and parking cars, impounded cars, housing animals. We're not talking about that. That's not what we're doing. Because $1 is a very good lease. I mean, whoever negotiated that should get on the Nimitz and negotiate at the Nimitz. That would be really, Mr. Khan did a really good job with this one. I want to know what we're using that space for. 3199 is a big building. It's going to take a lot of resources, electricity, garbage, water. You're going to store animals there with none of these things? I see shenanigans.
Thank you. Mayor, there's no more public comment in person, and we have one hand up on.
Take the online comment next, please.
IT, can you get the timer ready? Douglas Spalding, you may unmute yourself.
Good evening, council members. I want to ask a question about the consent item regarding the Community Police Review Board's administrative procedures. I'm mindful that in your earlier meeting with the independent labor negotiator, that you were discussing not just the city manager's position, but also the contract with the SFPOA. I don't know if the city attorney or anyone is going to report on that and then and the other items on this agenda. So I want to ask a question now. Is that something that the Community Police Review Board would be privy to in the sense of not deciding the negotiation, but having a voice in the negotiation? It seems to me that we should take advantage of this body and that this would be a kind of policy that would be important to seek their input on. In the administrative procedures, it seems a little diffuse, not real specific about what kinds of things the Community Police Review Board is able to take up or not. So, is the Community Police Review Board able to discuss things like, traffic stops and racial profiling, and are we talking about also the business end of the police department? So I just I don't see it in the administrative procedures as written. I know there were some negotiation around a few points there, and I can see how that's been worded. But I guess I am seeking more details, and I think the Community Police Review Board should have as large a voice as possible in terms of how the police department functions. And I think that's for the good of everyone. I think the more voices we get, the better resolution we'll come to. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, there's no more public comment.
Close public comment. At this point in time, I'll do two things. But I'm going to skip that. No. So I'm going to ask city manager. There appears to be some confusion about one of the items on the consent calendar, the 3199 address. So are you aware that there might be some confusion about the physical address, but can you just provide a little bit of clarity so that as we decide to vote, we understand what the public speaker might have been concerned about?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'm actually going to hunt to the city attorney as he has the details behind the lease terms that he can answer more appropriately than I can.
Thank you, City Manager. To answer the question, the leased premises that is in question is a portion, very small portion that already exists that's being used by the police department for storage of vehicles and evidence and some temporary animal hold until they're picked up by the East Bay SPCA. And that was a temporary, just hours, not long-term. And the leased premises is not the entire parcel or total site. So the premises is just the portion that the city has been occupying. The 3199 Alvarado refers to the address of the trust. We can clarify in further, you can provide additional information once we finish negotiating the lease and can post it to the website related to this item once we finish the lease negotiations. But the premises is just that portion of property, not the entire stretch of the parcel.
Thank you for the clarification. At this point in time, is there further discussion from council or desire to change the motion in any way? Seeing none, I call the question.
All votes are in. Motion passes 601 with Councilmember Simon absent.
Moving to item 4, do we have a report on closed session?
Thank you, Mayor. No reportable actions were taken in closed session this evening. Direction was provided to staff on the item of 4A with contract negotiations. A contract will come before the council at the July 17th meeting in an open session as required by the Brown Act, and there will be an oral presentation upon it. So expect that to come at the July 17th meeting. And Mayor, I just wanted to, on the second item, it had nothing to do with the consent item. The discussion in closed session on 4B had no effect and no discussion was had related to the CPRB. It had nothing to do with that.
The only other thought that I'll offer for the public is that there was robust discussion. That meeting lasted almost an hour. A good dialogue, good exploration of possibilities, and I think every single council member weighed in, providing thoughts and guidance in the formulation to offer guidance to the city staff. Are there any city manager and city attorney reports today?
Mayor, City Council, I do have 2 reports today. First, I would like to ask Jessica Lobodin to come forward, and I could not be more thrilled to introduce our new Human Services Director. And she's just going to take a few minutes to tell you a little bit about herself and how excited she is to be here in our community. So Jessica, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, City Manager Robustelli. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to say thank you so much for the opportunity to join you this evening, say hello, and briefly introduce myself. As City Manager Robustelli mentioned, my name is Jessica Lobodin, and I'm so thrilled to be joining the City of San Leandro as the Human Services Director. I bring over a decade of experience across the private, nonprofit, and public sectors in the fields of human health, community, social services, and have served in a variety of capacities, developing policies and programs related to addressing homelessness, community mental health services, poverty alleviation, senior services. And I'm really excited to bring this expertise to the City of San Leandro. I wanted to take a moment to thank and recognize the staff in the city and all of the community partners who have been doing such amazing work. I'm so excited to learn from you all and help support your goal of addressing homelessness in San Leandro, in addition to community health services and senior services. Thank you again for this opportunity, and I look forward to meeting with you all individually over the coming weeks.
And my last quick announcement, wanted to share with the community that we are hosting 4 community dialogue sessions for the Stephen Taylor Sanctity of Life Pavilion. 1 occurred last week, and we have 3 more in-person events coming up. There are multiple ways to provide input. Our next in-person event will be Tuesday, July 11th from 5:30 to 7:30 at the main library. And then we have 2 subsequent ones at the main library as well, August 9th, 5:30 to 7:30, and August 12th, 11 to 1. If you can't make it, we have other ways for you to provide input. You can leave a voicemail at 510-519-9215 or email sanleandro@kernswest.com. Or we also have an online survey found on our website. The direct link is www.sanleandro.org/sanctity of life, all one word, which also lists the options I previously mentioned. So please, we are excited to hear from the community about this project and invite you to participate.
So with that, we'll move on to item number 6, which is public comment. Again, as a reminder, this is public comment for items that are not listed on our agenda, but which are within the subject matter jurisdiction of this council. At this point in time, we will open up the floor to public comment.
Mayor, I have no public comment in person, and I have some hands up online right now.
You can go online, please.
IT, if you can get the timer ready, please. Cindy Rocha, you may unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you, City Council. I'd like to ask you to please reconsider ranked choice voting in San Leandro. It's confusing, it's overcomplicated, and in all ranked choice elections, the votes are calculated and not purely counted, as in a runoff election, where the top 2 candidates remain after receiving the majority of votes. In other words, ranked choice deprives voters of an educated and meaningful vote, especially in the final rounds. This means their vote was calculated rather than just counted one time as cast by one person for one candidate, which would have been their chosen candidate. So it's a myth that with more training of our voters will greatly eliminate the confusion and errors associated with ranked choice voting. Never mind that this claim has been stated since ranked choice's inception, and for over 2 decades, a high percentage of voters are still very confused with ranked choice voting. Never mind that more training drives up election costs. The bottom line is that the amount of training that the public has received for ranked choice voting has been incredible and very costly. New voters will always have to be trained, and return voters are still expecting the process to be simple, not complicated. A complicated voting process makes citizens less likely to want to vote. Confusion in voters makes them feel incapable of choosing the best candidate, and these feelings drive up disenfranchisement. It's a myth that ranked choice voting drives up voter turnout. In the last 2 decades, ranked choice voting has not increased voter turnout. In fact, comparatively lower voter turnout in municipalities using ranked choice has been a consistent pattern. San Leandro, you really need to reconsider this. We have an election coming in the future, and this is bad news. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa Wong, you may unmute yourself.
Oh, hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Melissa Wong will come back to you. Seems like you fell off of Zoom. Chris Bammer, you may unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I heard that we went ahead and voted on the consent calendar and passed 10G because there's some confusion. I think we should, get the confusion squared away before we agree on something. So I would like to request that we do a aerial map when we produce all the documents for the minutes, when all this stuff becomes official. Do an aerial Google Maps and have a highlighted area so the public knows what we're talking about. I'm very, very confused. I'm looking at all these public documents that are for our benefit. The address on the document is 3199 Alvarado, not Chapman Road. Chapman Road is a half a mile away from Alvarado, so I don't know what you guys are talking about. I'm driving on Chapman Road right now. I'm in front of the maintenance yard. I would like to know what we're talking about. You guys and your confusion and moving the consent calendar around. Since you're already messing up the handbook, why don't you just put the consent calendar at #1 so that way nobody can talk about it and you can put things through like you want. It's such bullshit the way you guys handle the community. This meeting is for the community, not for you. And the way that you guys disregard anything that we say and turn things around so you don't have to listen to us. So you're going to get to hear me talk for 2 minutes on every item for the rest of the year. So you're going to get to listen to me for 20 minutes, not just 3 minutes. So if you're going to change the handbook, I'd put it back to 3 minutes for public comment, but you're going to have to listen to this crap for me for 20 minutes every meeting.
Thank you. Melissa Wong, you may unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. So hello, as it is July, I want to wish everyone a very happy fiscal new year. In February, you may recall that I first asked that we have performance measure before the year begins. So I hope that we get the measures sooner rather than later. I would really appreciate this, and I understand it will take time for the first time. What we cannot wait though, and I hope the council, mayor, and the city manager agree, is the launching of the participatory budgeting program. As I mentioned in person in the last council meeting, I represent the Washington Homeowners Association, and our HOA is ready to pilot the participatory budgeting program. We just need the city to officially support the program by allowing us to reach out to the residents to brainstorm projects to improve our own neighborhoods and see the projects become reality. I know that council member Fred Simon supports it, and I know many of you as well. So please let us know when the residents can see this program start. I really appreciate your thought on this. Thanks.
Thank you. Douglas Spalding, you may unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. Well, I very much appreciate the attitude and philosophy of Chief Pridgeon, who's quoted in the June 22nd issue of San Leandro Times saying, quote, "The best way to fight crime is to make it so criminals don't have a reason to commit a crime in the first place. Invest in school programs, help make housing affordable, and provide resources to help low-income residents. This won't solve the crime problem, but it will give them less of a reason to commit crime." I find myself aligned with that statement, and I think the statement also aligns very closely with the city's priorities. And the promise of San Leandro Safe, combining, integrating the police department and the fire department and human resources, is that there's a strategic framework in order to take the chief's approach. But I find since the important step was taken to make human services its own department, that it's kind of been like the poor stepchild. It hasn't really gotten any oomph. So I'm happy that we have a new director. I want to welcome you, Director Lobadan. I went to the Human Services Commission meeting to welcome you, but you weren't there. And I don't know if that's just because you were so new and you're trying to work out your schedule still. But I think it'd be important for you to be at those meetings. And I think that the city should take advantage of the Human Services Commission and see it as a place where discussion can take place around some of these issues, including mental health first response and putting resources into the unhoused and et cetera, et cetera. It's, kind of had a defunctory, pass out some grants every year role, but that really it's underutilized. And I think, unfortunately, that's the case with many of our boards and commissions. Like I said earlier in this meeting, I think the Citizenship Police Review Board is underutilized. I think it was a mistake to end the Arts Council. I just went by the triangle, and guess what? The per pods, they've turned into the Cheshire Cat. They disappeared. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, there is no further public comment.
So I want to close public comment. We'll offer two observations. The first one being that when we receive an official lease, the parcel of property that was discussed, I think it was 10G that Mr. Bammer was referencing, there will be an aerial map. So we'll be fully transparent there. In addition, I think there was reference to performance measures. Just to clarify, we did adopt performance measures as part of this year's budget. And we, as a council, have committed to continuing to refine those performance measures as we observe how they are being implemented and their effectiveness measuring. I have Council Member Blue in queue. Is there a comment that you'd like to make?
Mr. Mayor, I'm wondering if you could remind the public and public speakers the decorum that is required when they're speaking.
I think one of the things that we are most focused on here, and I think we've been driving it for the last 6 months, is the importance of decorum, that we treat each other with respect, we treat individual council members with respect, we treat the body with respect, and that we afford you the same respect. And so that the objective is always to help inform decision-making, to guide that decision-making so that everybody has a chance to speak freely without feeling attacked as a speaker, or to sit up here and to process the information that's being received without being attacked. That's our encouragement around decorum and our expectation as well. At this point in time, I'm going to move to item number 7, City Council calendars and announcements. Okay, seeing none, I'm going to move then to item number 8, presentations. Our first presentation is a presentation on the proposed garbage recycling organic service package for Alameda County Industries, commonly known as ACI, and the franchise negotiations in particular there. I think we have a combination of Jennifer Aletta and our consultant working together to present this item. So I will turn it over first to Ms. Aletta, who is our Public Works Services Manager.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here to introduce our consultants here from Farncoffen, I'm sorry, HF&H, I forgot, who will be giving you a presentation on our next steps in the solid waste procurement process. I have Rob Hilton, President of HF&H, and he will be assisted by Alicia Castaneda, who's the project manager for HF&H. So I will hand it over.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Good to be with you tonight. We are here continuing our discussion about the solid waste recycling and organics contract. And specifically tonight, we're looking to share with you the proposed scope of services and some of the key business terms for the discussions that we'll be having with ACI. So we want to give a little bit of background on those services and on the process we've been through, talk about some of the supporting services that are included in the contract, do a little bit of a deeper dive on some of the services that could improve on beautification in the community, talk about those key business terms, and then walk you through some of our next steps. So we are looking for the council to provide us any corrections or changes in direction if you feel like we've gone down a different path than you would like. But tonight will not be your final opportunity to provide input. Obviously, we're not asking for any final decisions, just guidance along the way. So if we do need to make later course corrections, we can. So as a bit of a reminder, the council has been engaged in a few things in this process so far. The council adopted a communications policy that governs the communications between the council and any proposers during the process. You identified some key priorities for that new collection agreement. Part of what we want to talk to you about tonight is making sure that we've got those reflected. You approved an extension option with ACI that provides the time to negotiate with them on a sole source basis without giving up the opportunity to go out to bid if we're not successful with that. And you endorsed a two-step process for procuring collection and then post-collection services. So just a reminder of the regional marketplace and also a place to let you know we intend to come back to you at your first October meeting to discuss that post-collection services procurement process. One of the big things that we're doing in this contract is implementing SB 1383. The council adopted an amendment to the existing agreement with ACI to support those services through the remainder of the term back in May of 2022. It's important to remember that while ACI is your contractor and they're performing a lot of the services and providing a lot of the services, ultimately the responsibility is on the city. And there are a number of things that the city needs to do that ACI cannot do for it. That said, ACI has been really a great partner in implementing SB 1383 since you adopted that amendment. And I particularly want to acknowledge Laura McCoyan and the outreach team who's been working with a lot of your businesses and multifamily properties to get folks onto service and in compliance. We will have a number of other regulatory issues and legislative issues that we're going to deal with in this new agreement. One of the bigger ones is that the Air Resources Board is looking at a zero emission program for heavy duty fleets, including refuse fleets. So that will be a discussion that we'll have ongoing, as well as any other emerging regulations that come up. So now I'm going to ask Alicia to come up and walk you through the scope of services that we'll be recommending.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. As Rob mentioned, I'm going to take the next several slides to talk a little bit about some of the services that we're proposing to have in this new agreement. I'll be focusing on the changes. Much of the services will stay the same. San Leandro has comprehensive services for single family, multifamily, and commercial properties. So we're going to first focus on single family here. Much of those services will stay the same. We'll still have that 3-cart system for single family that's picked up once a week. We are planning to include some options for the collection of used cooking oil as well as textiles. We want to provide kitchen pail distribution to single family homes so to make it easy to collect food scraps in their homes. And we want to modify the bulky collection program and the holiday tree collection program to expand those a little bit. So moving from 1 pickup per year for bulky items to 2, and then extending the number of weeks that those holiday trees are collected post that Christmas holiday. So those are some of the changes that we're hoping to implement for single family services. There are some differences between the services provided in the ACI area and the waste management area of the city. For example, in waste management, the recycling is picked up every other week as opposed to weekly as it is in the ACI area. However, in that waste management area, they do have the 2 times per year bulky pickups, which is one reason why we're going to try and match that service in the ACI service area. For multifamily, again, we're going to see some similar services as well as some changes. The goal here is to create more equitable services between the single family and the multifamily sector. So you'll notice that a lot of the changes that we're proposing for single family, we are also going to propose here for multifamily, including changes to the bulky collection program to include pickups per unit rather than per property. And again, we'll see those kitchen pails being provided to multifamily customers, the extension of the holiday tree collection window. And here you'll also notice that we have added extra service tags, which is an option for residents to purchase service tags if they have additional material to collect. That's a program that's offered already for single family customers. So again, we want to extend that to multifamily. For commercial, the biggest change that we'll see here is to extend the leaf debris collection to the commercial businesses. So trees are all over the city. We want to help be able to manage that leaf litter throughout the city during those fall and winter months. So we're hoping to extend that program to the commercial businesses. For city services, the goal is to maintain the current service levels provided to city facilities throughout San Leandro. We hope to add some additional parameters around response times and direct communication lines between city staff and ACI supervisors, but otherwise those services will largely stay the same. In regards to city events, the city currently has 5 city events where ACI provides service. In the new agreement, we're hoping to provide a little more flexibility for the city to determine when they need those services provided. So we'll hope to put together a baseline of what the city currently needs and the events that are currently on the calendar and how those might shift over the term of the agreement. And again, provide a little bit more flexibility so that those services are provided when the city needs them. So aside from those direct services, there are also a number of support services that ACI will be providing as part of this agreement. One of those is customer service. Currently, there is a pretty high level of satisfaction for customer service from ACI. The city receives very low number of complaints about the services that ACI provides. So we're not going to be making huge changes here to something that we don't see as necessarily broken. The goal for customer service will be to modernize the agreement and really just implement industry best practices. Many of those are things that ACI is already doing. For example, they have a system to send out robocalls to remind customers when there might be holiday service disruptions. They have already granted the city staff access to Tower, which is their customer database, so that there's good communication about what's happening with the customer base. So all of these will be memorialized in the next agreement. Education and outreach is a key component of SB 1383 compliance. And so we will, again, make some adjustments to the next agreement to modernize the agreement and bring that up into industry best practices. We're hoping to increase collaboration between the city and ACI to ensure that effective outreach materials are developed and disseminated throughout the city. And we also want to make sure that we're matching the services that ACI is providing in some of the other surrounding communities. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it back over to Rob to talk a little bit more about some of the beautification services.
So as you all know, you've invested significantly in beautification programs within your community already. But there is always more that we can do around that, right? And so we've heard you loud and clear. There's a number of areas to focus on where the trash contract can help with this, and we're going to explore all of those. There's obvious things like the timeliness of collection of street litter containers so that they don't become overflowing and windblown litter, dealing with illegal dumping hotspots quickly so that they don't become attractive nuisance, providing services like attending to multifamily move in and move out, and the bulk item collection that Felicia was talking about helps to mitigate those things from happening in the first place. Making sure that we've got enough frequency of collection and parameters for increasing frequency of collection of overloaded containers when they occur. Again, that's just going to result in windblown litter. It's going to get all over. So there are a number of key areas where the franchisee can help out, and we're going to be working through the procurement process to solve some of those problems with them and to identify what are the appropriate intervention strategies. And some of those are direct intervention strategies like picking the stuff up. Others are indirect, educational campaigns or targeted outreach or expanding access to programs. So we're going to look through the matrix of the different challenges and the different opportunities and work with the company to understand the best way to approach those. That's going to be a pretty collaborative process because it needs to integrate well into what you're already doing in terms of your programs and your services provided by City Crews. So we'll work with ACI on that. We'll work with the city attorney to make sure that as we approach this from the franchise angle, that everything we're doing is above board legally. And then we'll bring those options back to you so that you understand both the opportunity as well as the cost impact of that opportunity. So next item relates to the key business terms of the agreement. Your current contract was a 10-year base term with 5 one-year extension options. In the new agreement, we're going to look at the pricing impact of a 10-year term versus a 15-year term. You've had a long history with ACI and they've performed relatively well. I don't think there's a lot of concern about entering into a longer term relationship with them if there's an appropriate savings to the ratepayers available for doing that longer term. So we'll be looking at both of those, plus some extension options. In compensation, we're going to be making a couple of recommended changes. Your current agreement just uses an index, a CPI index to adjust rates and doesn't ever really look at the actual costs of providing service or the actual revenues derived from that service. And most of the other agreements in Alameda County have some interval for doing that check-in. So we're recommending matching the compensation arrangements that many of the other communities in Alameda County have, where you have an annual rate adjustment that's done through that CPI index or a blend of them. And then having periodic, probably 2 during the base term of the agreement, check-ins to look at what are their actual costs. Are there savings that should be shared with the ratepayers? Have there been surprises that weren't anticipated by the company, couldn't have been anticipated perhaps because of changes in law? And what's happened with the revenue? Is the revenue generating what it should under the agreement, and then adjusting rates to match that? As we do that, we would place caps on those annual adjustments so that your council would be assured that in any given year that wasn't going to go over a particular percentage. I don't want to offer it right now because the company's sitting right behind me and I don't want to negotiate from the dais, but we will establish a cap on that. Your current cap is 10% before it has to come back to the city council for approval. And then the last thing is that we'll be looking at potentially installing senior rates. There are some legal issues with that, so we want to make sure that as we approach that, we do it in a way that is above board legally, but we've got a couple of options for doing that. So I will not go through all of the details of the schedule with you, but I do want to highlight a couple of key points. So tonight's council workshop on the services is really an opportunity for you to give us any redirection on the services that we're going to initially ask for in our negotiations with ACI. We intend to initiate those negotiations relatively quickly. We're drafting the agreement right now. We'll be drafting the solicitation documents and then getting those to ACI as quickly as we can, certainly no later than September, but I'm hoping to beat that. Then we'll be back to the council in October with the service package, and we'll get for the post-collection services, similar to this presentation, and then get your direction related to those post-collection services, issue that. The response time for post-collection services is significantly less than for collection because the complexity of the activity isn't as great. And so we would intend to get both of those proposals back at about the same time and begin in earnest evaluating, doing due diligence and negotiating through those agreements with a goal of bringing a final decision to you in the spring of next year. So you'll see us in December, January, February, and probably March to award these agreements. And then the selected contractor will need to implement the transition processes for both collection and post-collection. So that, especially when it comes to acquiring equipment, can be pretty long. And I will close with just a reminder of the process integrity policy that your council adopted, really just daylighting any communications that may be had with a potential proposer or potential contractor on this. So with that, I'm available for any questions you may have.
So at this point in time, we will take council member questions if there are any. Vice Mayor, please.
Thank you for your presentation. Garbage is a big issue in San Leandro. It's all over the place. Yes. So any way that we could work together to get it cleaner is important. I wanted to ask you about a policy I put forward to lock up all the dumpsters at all the strip malls and shopping centers here in San Leandro. How would that affect the services with you guys?
What do you mean by lock them up? Physically have them locked
Have them locked
between
up so
services?
people don't go through them and get garbage all over our city. Like what's happening?
Yeah, we've had a number of communities that have installed that requirement in their franchise agreement. There are some costs attendant to it because the locking mechanisms on the containers typically require the driver to dismount the truck and go and unlock the container. There are some gravity locking devices and things like that that we might look at, but they have a cost too. So we can explore that with the company and see, what would that look like? And we could bring that back to you to see, how many folks would that impact and what kind of cost concern might that be?
Okay, because yeah, that's a big issue in our city.
Yeah.
Another thing is dumping, like we saw the slide of illegal dumping. I know other cities or other parts of the county, like Castro Valley, they have a voucher program. I've spoken to some of you about a voucher program, getting one in San Leandro where, because right now, it used to be when you go to the dumps, it'd be $20, $40 a load. Now it's $110 for minimum load. So people are just dumping all over the place. So if we can have like a voucher program, see what the cost is on that. So we could bring it to different neighborhoods. And if people don't have trucks, someone else can use it, at least so we can get it dumped. So that's really important.
Understood. Yeah, I've seen those voucher programs in a number of places. And I think also affording folks more bulk item collection helps with that issue as well. If you don't have the pickup truck to run it down to the dump, the company's got a truck, they can come and pick the thing up from your driveway.
Yeah. Another option I was looking into is, I don't know about ACI, but like an apartment complex, if it's 200 units, I believe to garbage, it's only considered like 1 unit. So I wanted to look into some way where we can rotate dumpsters in front of apartment complex or something. Because whenever someone moves out of apartment complex or condos, whatever, they leave all their furniture there, their couches and everything. So I didn't know if there's something we could work out with that too, because that's a big issue.
That's the move in, move out program. That
Okay.
It's not there. So
Okay,
yes, we're
okay.
definitely on track with that one. Thank you.
Okay. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions at this time? Seeing none, I'm going to move to, sorry, Councilmember Bowen, I got you there at the very end.
Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Thank you for the presentation. Just a little comment. I appreciate my colleagues' comments as well. I think one of the things I really appreciated around the support services for education and outreach, I think that the more that we can collaborate between the city and ACI to be able to come up with ways to educate the community as well, not just on what options are available. I think a lot of times people just don't realize what services are there and what they can do. I think that there is a shared goal of everybody wanting a cleaner city, and people don't want all of the illegal dumping, and obviously increasing the cadence of when we up and really focusing on those hotspots is critical. I think that also collaborating and being more presence with other community stakeholders would be really great. I think that there is a lot in terms of the education that's done at all levels. So I would just lean on that. That's
So at this point in time, I'm going to take public comment.
Mr. Mayor, there's no public comment in person. We have one hand up online. If IT, you can get the timer ready. Ginny Madsen, you may unmute yourself.
Hi, it's Ginny Madsen, and I just have to say something about this because I live in a multifamily place, 11 duplexes, all share the same 4 receptacles, same 4 garbage cans. And I have gotten ACI information and tried to give it to new tenants. But the fact of the matter is that we get no notification from the account owner. Only the account owners find out about changes. And I was looking at the pictures, and I've been told in the past that there would be labeling on the containers as to what goes in, because I've tried to educate people and it's just really hard. I'm getting too old to pull things out of the trash. And also I want to say thank you very much for the bulk pickup, because I tried to get a mattress picked up 4 years ago, and I was told it would cost me $100 because I did not have an account. So these are important things for multifamily units. I live in a pretty small one, but the bigger they are, the more these problems multiply. So labeling and outreach to tell people what's allowed in each one of the container types is really important. And because the city is going to be is on the hook for the compliance with 1383, this is important to the city, as I'm sure you know. Thank you.
Thank you. There's one more hand up, Mr. Mayor. Christopher Bammer, you may unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm confused on how this hand raising thing's going, because I had my hand raised and it got lowered and I had to raise it again. So I got to pay attention every time. I have to raise my hand every time. Can I just let you know right now that I want to speak on every single agenda item? Just make sure you call my name every single time. Make it a little bit more efficient. How does ACI affect me? What is ACI? I'm waste management. So can you explain to me why that is? Why we have 2 different garbage companies in the city? Is it kind of like we have 2 different school districts in the city? I'm confused. I'm really confused. Everything confuses me with the city of San Leandro. I'm trying to figure it out. I've been coming for like 5-6 years. I've heard the same presentations every year, like the one that's coming up. Are we going to have a presentation on how good the CAT team performed? That's what I want to know, because we got another program coming in that's going to replace it that's going to be even better. So I want to have some numbers to compare them to. As far as me and my decorum, you know what? Next time I'm in there and you don't like my decorum, you can take me out there 5150 up to John George. Again, Mr. Ballou. You know, if you don't like it, I'm sorry. As far as I'm concerned, you won by default. You vote for yourself and win. So speak for yourself. Leave the other 89-2 to me and the other people that come and speak regularly, who pay attention to what's going on. I'd be curious to know what you made in overtime working as a San Leandro police officer.
Thank you.
At this point in time, I'll close public comment and move on to council member. If you have any additional commentary, will serve as a basis for our guidance consultant or staff. Councilmember Ballou, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Rod, Alicia, and Jen. It was a question, but I didn't want to really get into the weeds yet. I was one of the members that was very concerned about protections for seniors and competitive pricing for seniors. And I heard maybe some legal things. Can you just help maybe us understand the tenor of those legal things? If there's room for us to advocate for some sort of state legislation, it would be nice to know where from, or if there's anything we can do to maybe move that needle where there's more of a workable solution or less trouble for you and the attorneys that get involved.
So the specific concern that we have is around any charges or rates that are property related in nature. And in that case, courts have tended to find that discounted rates to a class of customers for an arbitrary reason like age or income level isn't allowable under Prop 218. And so one of the things that we need to look at is the applicability of Prop 218 to these rates. And then if they apply, finding an alternative funding source for the subsidy. I've worked with a number of communities in the Central Valley who fund it through the general fund, either low income discounts or senior discounts, as well as some that even raise community funds. The city of Los Banos takes up a collection. People pay extra on their utility bills to provide for a discount to portions of the community that need it. So we can evaluate some different alternatives for how to legally do it, regardless of the application of 218. It's just what will it cost and to whom.
So following PG&E's the way they do it, where we all pay a little bit of money to subsidize those who need a little more help.
That's right.
That's legal.
The way they do it through the California Public Utilities Commission, yes, it is. So that's what we need to do. We can get there. It's a matter of what's it going to cost and who's it going to cost to. And so we want to analyze that and bring that back to you.
Presenting an option that you can get 4 people to vote. Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor, please.
Yes, I had a question for you. Sorry. What's your billing cycle? Is it 2 months or 3 months? Because I know, just to let the community know as they ask. Oh, go ahead.
Quarterly billing for ACI. I'm not ACI, just to be clear. Nice folks over here.
It's every 3 months.
Quarterly for residential and monthly for commercial.
Okay. Okay. Just to let the community know, as they might be wondering, we're 60% ACI, we're 40% waste management. Okay. And so both of them do it every 3 months. They bill every 3 months. And now waste management gets the recycle every other week. And you guys get and ACI gets it every week. And now they have 2 bulks and waste management has 2 bulks. Okay. I'm just trying to justify it because I hear from some people that ACI is a little more expensive than waste management. So now you guys are matching and you guys have the recycle every week. So you're actually doing more. So
one of the hidden secrets is in the waste management service area, there's a charge on your property tax bill that supplements what you pay every quarter in your regular bill. So while it appears to be a discount, there's money coming from different.
Yeah, it's like a $20 difference or so. Yeah. Okay.
Seeing no other commentary, I'll just offer a few thoughts. Do you think this concept of notification to the actual residents and communication to residents is important, particularly in multifamily dwellings where it's not the property owner? I think one of our public commenters mentioned that. I think that concept is important, and how you make that happen is up to you. This concept of locked bins. I think that we do see non-trivial amount of windblown trash coming as a result of people digging through bins. It happens certainly in our larger shopping areas. It happens in other places as well. So I think that coming back to us with a cost of offering that service is particularly important for us to consider. It's something that while I don't want that to get lost. Council member Aguilar.
Thank you, Mayor Gonzalez. Thank you for that presentation. Just one question with regards to special rates. I noticed that there's senior rate pending legal review, and according to the Assembly bill, was there ever any discussion with regards to low income?
Table when we discussed it. So yes, we'll be looking at both.
Okay. Thank you.
And one of the questions may be, is it available to low income seniors or all seniors? And so one of the analyses we need to do is to kind of look at how much of the population different programs might affect.
Got it.
Seeing no other comments, I'm going to move to item 8B. It's going to be a presentation by Alameda County Fire Department. Alameda County Fire Chief McDonald, welcome to our chambers.
There it is. All right, thank you very much. Mayor Gonzalez, members of the San Leandro City Council. It's an honor and a privilege for me to be here tonight. Thank you very much for this opportunity to present about the Alameda County Fire Department. I'm Willie McDowell, I'm the Alameda County Fire Chief, and very honored to be here with you all tonight. Open to present information about the operation here in the city of San Leandro. Talk about the entire Alameda County Fire Department, the communities that are served, the resources that are available, and the programs, our budget, employees, and also talk about current initiatives, including the advanced practitioner program that we're working on with the city of San Leandro. And then finally, I'd like to introduce our strategic plan. So here in San Leandro, we operate out of 5 fire stations, beginning with San Leandro City of San Leandro Fire Station number 9, 415 studio. We have it in this station, an engine with a fire captain, engineer, and firefighter paramedic in a truck, captain, engineer, and firefighter paramedic as well. Station 10 on 2194 William Street. Station 11, 14903 Catalina Street, and Station 12, 1065 143rd Avenue. This station has a fire engine, a truck, and as well a battalion chief assigned. I'll talk a little bit about the responsibilities of battalion chief in just a minute. And then finally, Fire Station 13637 Fargo Avenue. The activity level here in San Leandro. First, let me talk about the assigned resources that we have here in San Leandro. Deputy Chief Eric Moore has been assigned to San Leandro. He's very involved in the leadership here in San Leandro. Yes. And he is a very sincere and committed member of the organization. We also have Division Chief Paige Bowie, who is the assigned division chief, and she is part of the city manager's team and staff. We have 63 firefighters assigned to the 5 fire stations, 1 deputy fire marshal, and 1 code compliance officer. Our total incident volume in San Leandro in 2022 was 12,701 emergency incidents, with about 70% of those, or 9,000 of them, were medical aid calls. The busiest engine company, the business resource we have within the Alameda County Fire Department operation is Engine 9 on Estadio. It ran about 4,050 calls last year. And then again, I say station 11, 12, and 13. The busiest of those, station 12, responded to about 4,700 calls for service last year. This is a breakdown of the incidents that we responded to in 2022. As you can see, we responded to 452 reported structure fires, 452 reported fires, and as I say, about 9,000 medical aid calls. Play a video for you. Did I do that wrong? Yeah. Okay.
I see engine bulbs on scene behind engine
So I would just like to say, Mayor and members of the San Leandro City Council, we have proudly served the city of San Leandro since 1995. We've been very honored to have the opportunity to be able to serve the residents of San Leandro, and we're so very thankful for the opportunity to serve this community. About the Alameda County Fire Department, we have 545 very hardworking, very dedicated men and women that really enjoy serving the community. We have 27 fire stations that we operate. 26 have engines in them. We have 7 truck companies. I will also mention that all of our resources are advanced life support certified and qualified. We have a paramedic on each one of those and the equipment to be able to provide advanced life support services. We also we have a $186 million budget in fiscal year 2024. We support and provide services from a regional dispatch center where we dispatch not only for Alameda County units, but also for the city of Livermore and Pleasanton, as well as the city of Fremont. And we provide pre-arrival instructions and priority medical dispatch services for Alameda County, as well as dispatch all the ambulances in the county. We serve in pretty much the entire county. We have resources in battalions throughout Alameda County. Battalions are geographic areas with groups of fire stations in them. We have 4 of them. Battalion 2 is our Castro Valley, San Lorenzo, Eden communities. Battalion 4 is here, San Leandro. Battalion 3 is out on the east side of the valley, and Battalion 7 is in the southern part of Alameda County. Responded to 47,820 emergency calls for service during 2020. It's a very busy year for us. About 1,300 fires were extinguished, and we responded to of the calls that we responded on, about 70% of those were medical aid calls. Our response time, 5 minutes, 59 seconds, and we completed 9,200 inspections and 1,300 plan reviews. We also have a number of special operations programs, including a type 1 hazardous materials response team that's available to all of our residents, all of our communities that we serve. It's the highest type of kind of resource in the state. We're able to do detection, monitoring, hazardous identification, and fully encapsulated entry with our team. We have a technical rescue team that is also a type 1 technical rescue team capable of performing confined space, high angle rescue, rope rescue, and entrapment missions. We have a water rescue team. Part of our water rescue program is stationed here in San Leandro at Station 10 and Station 11. We also provide wildland protection, wildland response, utilizing smaller, lighter pump and drive engines that allow for higher clearance and allow for us to move around and pump water while we're fighting the fire. We also have a couple of bulldozers to aid in the wildland responses. Just wanted to touch on the mental health program that we are working on with the city of San Leandro. Want to thank you for the opportunity to be able to work on that program and to be able to provide the service here in the city of San Leandro. The staffing on the unit will be an advanced practitioner, nurse practitioner with mental health and behavioral health training. And it'll also have a firefighter paramedic on the unit. It'll be responding specifically to the calls of that type that are prioritized as mental health, behavioral health incidents. We've submitted or released a request for proposal to find partners to provide the nurse practitioner for us. We've hosted a pre-bid conference for folks to understand what it is that we're trying to do and what we're looking for in terms of qualifications and certifications. The responses of that RFP are due back in mid-August. We expect to award the contract sometime at the end of September, or maybe into October. And then we'll spend the last part of the year developing the programs and the procedures of policies on the response protocols and developing the relationships with behavioral health and mental health alternative destinations where we would be able to have relationships and be able to provide services to our residents. I'm hoping to be able to launch that program in July of 2024. We're very excited about it. Some additional current initiatives that we're working on as an organization is we are anticipating a significant number of retirements in our near future, as well as 2024. So we are currently engaged in staffing or recruiting for new firefighters. Currently, we're running 2 recruitment processes. We're thinking that we might have as many as 40 to 45 retirements in the next 2-year period. So yeah, so we are currently recruiting. We're doing a lateral firefighter recruitment process right now. We're just wrapping that up. Those folks are experienced firefighters that have been trained somewhere and have certifications and experience. We offered 16 conditional offers to folks. And so we're going to go through the background process now for an academy that will be scheduled for January. And we're currently going through an entry-level firefighter recruitment process. All in all, as I say, we're looking to hire about 40 to 45 new employees through those 2 processes. And we're working on the advanced practitioner program, as I just mentioned. We're also engaged in emergency medical services program where we're negotiating with all of the fire departments here in Alameda County, negotiating memorandums of understandings on how we will respond with each other, our relationships with each other in order to form a seamless service of programs and services that we'll be able to provide to our communities. We're significantly involved in providing employee health and wellness programs to our employees to provide just assistance to them, counseling, as well as nutritional information and employee assistance, as well as peer support programs for our folks. And we're involved in a number of new building programs, not only a new training center that we're hoping to start construction on in 2024, but also 3 fire stations that we'll be building with the latest design and programming, and as well as earthquake requirements built into those new stations. I'd like to announce, I'm very proud of this, that we have been working on a strategic plan. I placed a strategic plan at your dais to say that it's really a cornerstone of something that we've been working on as an organization. We did it in partnership, our employees, as well as the department. In developing our strategic plan, we see it as a 10-year blueprint for how we're going to run the organization and how we're going to focus our resources and kind of the goals and objectives that we would need in order to be successful. We went through the process by organizing a strategic planning team. It's made up of a cross-section of members of our department, from chiefs to members of our dispatch center, to our union members, everyone in between, and developed developed the information that went into the strategic plan to develop the goals and the objectives. We also reached out to a lot of our stakeholders, including members of our Fire Advisory Commission, our Board of Supervisors, all of our city managers, to get input on what we should be thinking about, what programs we should be including in our organization, and how we should focus the department. Have I been talking for 15 minutes already? Okay, I'm sorry. I'll get on with it. The strategic plan has 5 goals that are identified in the strategic planning process. Those goals are fiscal sustainability, an organization closely aligned with community values, needs, and services and resources to meet the mission, sustainable organizational vitality and viability, and improved organizational systems. We are at this time rolling this plan out to our organization, all of our members, introducing all of the goals and objectives that are in this document, assigning assignments to each of our program managers and our chief officers, and monitoring tools and developing work plans that would include all of the goals and objectives in terms of prioritizing when they're going to get done and how they're going to get done. Very proud of very proud of the document, very proud of the input that you all have had in helping us get that document put together. And it also is, I think, fitting that we are using it to celebrate our 30th year of operation. We just turned 30 on July 1st of 2023. I placed a challenge coin at all of your dice to say we're partners, and we're very proud of that. And I'm proud of the men and women of Alameda County Fire. I'm proud of the organization that we've become. And it's also, I'm proud to be here tonight to present to you and to say thank you for allowing us to be your provider of service. Thank you.
Presentation. At this point in time, we will take questions from council members, then we'll go to public comment and come back to council members. So Vice Mayor, please.
Thank you for your presentation. I really value all of your work and all the firefighters. Thank you so much. My grandfather was a firefighter for 30 years in Castro Valley, and he almost died several times, and he's 92 years old now.
Yes.
I really value you guys' work.
Thank you very much.
I have a few questions for you. One of them is, why is it better for the city of San Leandro to have the Alameda County Fire Department instead of like Hayward having their own fire department? Can you explain that to us?
I think it has a lot to do with the ability for us to have programs and services that we're able to share in the cost of developing the organization, of operating the organization, and share the expertise, subject matter experts and professionals that are able to develop programs and be able to roll those out. Just the sheer volume of the organization, the being able to share resources across borders and boundaries, having special operations that probably wouldn't be available to a number of departments if they didn't have, the resources that we have. And just I think the integration of our resources into the community to be ensured that we're providing the services that you really want and desire, and that you have a lot of influence and control over those. And it's much more cost effective. I think that we can provide the services at a much lower rate than you would be able if you had to have a fire chief and training officer and all the chief officers and all the members of the department that are only the responsibility of a single community.
The next question is, how many firefighters do we have at each fire station at any given night? Do we have enough for 2 crews, or how does that work exactly?
So our firefighters are assigned to 24-hour shifts. They come to work at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they work, 24 hours, and then they work a second day. We have in each of the stations here in San Leandro, we have one engine company that has a fire captain, an engineer, and a firefighter paramedic. So in station 10 and 11 and 13, there's a single resource. It's one engine company. And those firefighters would be on that 24-hour period. And station 9 and station 12, we also have a truck company. It's a much larger piece of equipment that has a lot of tools and equipment, extrication equipment, utilities, able to stabilize incidents and gain access vertically, has ladders and rescue tools. Those have also 3, a captain, engineer, and a firefighter paramedic. So 2 of the stations have 2 companies assigned, and the other 3 have 1. And also we have a battalion chief assigned here who oversees the entire operation and coordinates the activities at multi-company responses and more significant, higher detail kinds of events. So they provide the oversight and the direction and coordination for all of those.
Last question is, So you said about we're gonna lose about 45 firefighters this coming up year. So are we gonna lose about almost 10% or?
Kind of forecasting over the next 2 years. So between now and December, we'll probably think we'll have maybe about 20, possibly a few more than that. And then into the next year, an additional 20, 25.
Do we have volunteer firefighters for the Alameda County Fire Department?
We do not. We have reserve firefighters that are trained in a lot of the evolutions that we utilize, but they aren't utilized in our emergency operation. We use them also for community outreach events and activities support. So we don't use them in the emergency operation.
So are we going to be able to move any of those to become, or I guess they don't have the same experience? So.
They don't have the same experience. They do have some of the training, and they have they've developed some of the knowledge over some of the training that we provided to them, as well as they've gotten it fire academies that they may have attended other places. We're hoping to recruit a lot of them into the department. So they're going through the process right now to apply and be selected for the next academy.
Yeah, because I think we should be able to recruit some of the volunteer fire. I know we don't have any over here, but ones that volunteer, they know the routine. Yeah.
Right. Yes.
So thank you.
Member Aguilar, please.
Hey, thank you for the presentation. You mentioned there were 12,000 calls last year in San Leandro alone. Is your force experiencing a staffing shortage? Can you talk more about where you're at staffing capacity? And
well, I will say, Council Member Aguilar, that we have just the right number of assigned firefighters today on the department as we need. We have 102 firefighters on duty each day, and 4 battalion chiefs, so 106. And that's how many we have assigned, and that's how many we actually have on the department. We are anticipating a number of retirements, and also we don't have any relief personnel. So when someone's injured, off on vacation, sick, whatever it may be, the folks that are assigned to regular duty have to work overtime shifts on their off-duty days. And so we're asking a lot of our folks to be able to fill in all those hours on a day in and day out basis. I would say we need additional staffing for just that purpose, to provide relief for our folks that are off for any leave of any type. As I say, we do anticipate some retirements. We are a little nervous about that. So that's why we're doing 2 recruit academies in this fiscal year. And we're also anticipating a significant retirement in one of our programs, and that's our hazardous materials program. And so we're taking steps to train up additional personnel on the department early before those retirements happen. So we'll have the adequate staffing to maintain that program.
thank you. And one other question with regards to the mental health response. What is your strategy to partner with the police department with regards to the advanced the nurse practitioner that you're working with? What's the strategy behind addressing those that are having mental health breakdowns?
Part of it will be collaborating very closely with police in development of the program, and also working with them on developing dispatch protocols for calls that come into the dispatch center, both to the police center as well as our regional dispatch center, to determine which calls can be categorized as mental health, behavioral health calls, and determine if there's any concern for violence or weapons that might be at the scene. If we can do that, and we plan to be able to train our dispatchers in making those assessments, that we would respond this unit without police response. In the event that we determine that there are not any violence or there's no weapons, or to request a police response on the cases where there are, but have them with us and work with us, and to develop training between the agencies to help provide the right kinds of de-escalation sorts of activities that will aid us in providing mental health services. And also, we expect to be able to make available to our folks that respond on calls that might not have been prioritized as mental health or behavioral health, but are determined to be that way once we responded and arrived, to have access to call out the mental health first response unit to provide services, evaluation, and assistance, and also to do that with the police.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Those are my questions. Thank you, Mayor.
You, Councilmember Blue, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief. The only question I have, I didn't hear you go into any detail on it. Can you talk a little bit about the chaplain services that your chaplains provide, what they provide for the public, what they provide for your firefighters, et cetera?
We have a number of, I'm gonna have to look at more, talk about, we have 5 volunteer chaplains that are assigned to the organization. Most of them have been with us for quite a long time. They're available for response on a call out to assist in, dealing with significant incidents, illnesses, injuries, deaths, to provide some support for the families and counsel as well, and maybe make connections with other assistants. They also provide support for our folks, some counsel, if you will, and just someone to talk to if there is a need for any of our members or individuals to provide that. They also help us with a number of our events on the department. So,
thank you.
Yeah, I have one more question. Can you turn it to slide 10 with the San Leandro call volume? I got a chance. Well, I'll make one observation while you're getting there. I noticed that calls for fires are only 3.5% of calls. People in the community probably think it's a lot higher than that, but it's only 3.5%. Okay. For the good intent calls, what do you guys consider good intent calls?
those are calls that are reported to our dispatch center that are thought to be an emergency. Like, barbecue in someone's backyard, but the smoke is seen.
Get closer to that microphone.
sorry.
I hear you online.
So is it like a false alarm? Okay.
It not quite a false alarm, because the intent was there to report an emergency that, someone thought that was an emergency at that location. But we're able to go out and provide some assistance. It may not be for a fire. It might not be for someone who's locked into a vehicle. But those are the kinds of responses that we would go to. Could also be, some flooding. Well, that's not good intent.
Oh, that'd be.
It's more the, I thought it was an emergency, or I thought it was this kind of an activity when it might have been something else.
That's all my questions. Thank you.
At this point in time, just got a couple of questions for you.
Yes, sir.
The San Leandro, I know there's a training center here of some type. I don't know details. I'm curious, as you develop your new training center, is the intention to sunset this center, put it to another use?
So our training center is at 890 Lola Street. It's here in San Leandro, and we've been utilizing it for got to be the entire time we've been in that department. But it's not ours. It belongs to the city of San Leandro. So we will be building a dispatch or a training center that will allow for us to move all of our training activities over to that site, and the city will make use of the land and the parcel for other uses in the future.
I know that we've talked about it in the past. I just don't know if it's been in this public setting. So we've got some fire stations, I think, that are seismically maybe up not to the current standards.
Yes.
Something you could talk a little bit about that to help me better understand that.
Yes, sir. Station 9 on Estadio, Station 12 on 143rd, Station 13 on Fargo are all very old stations that were built prior to the time that seismic standards were required. Seismic requirements were placed on building and particularly essential services, the buildings to be able to withstand an earthquake and to be operational and allow the rigs and the resources to be able to exit the fire station And all of those have significant, I think, deficiencies when it comes to their ability to operate those stations in all cases. And so it would be necessary to, I think, completely rebuild them to be able to satisfy that requirement and also to be ensure the safety of the folks in the stations and their ability to actually exit the stations in the future.
So I'll just close with a request, so I don't have to make it later during the comment. for
Okay.
this. The data on calls we receive, I could get that broken down, you can share it with everybody, broken down by station.
Yes.
The kind of the characterization of the calls by station. If you can send that to us in a spreadsheet, appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Okay, at this point in time, let's move to public comment. If we have any.
Mr. Mayor, there's no public comment in person and I see no hands up on Zoom.
So I will close public comment and move to final council member comments on this item. Councilmember Blue, please.
So 2 items. One I've said before, this one, the other one I have. The first one is I know somewhere in Hayward, I think it's Hayward Fire. They have a station, a fire station that's duplex with a medical center. Like if the opportunity ever arises at San Leandro, I think it would be an awesome chance to partner with a medical center like Tiburcio or Davis Street or something like that. I just think that's a really, really good model. I know we don't have the buildings right now for it, the space, but that ever comes up in the future, that's something I'd be interested in. Constituents are very interested in that.
It would be an awesome relationship for us to have, and I think it'd be a great service for the community.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Chief. And the other one is, and I've said this before, even to your union people, motorcycle paramedics. They have them in big communities where there's a lot more traffic and tougher to get through things. And in talking to people, it is really a good replicable model. It's worked in Europe and England for years. They're just kind of the clock stoppers. They get there immediately and have all the immediate stuff they need, and then the fire truck gets there and takes over, et cetera. But something that I think I do think it's really worth looking at. We're not at the point where we have driverless paramedics coming out yet, but even drone. 20 years from now, there's going to be drones at Burrell Field that launch off a platform with an AED to get to a call before the professionals get there for advanced cardio life support. I think that's something down the road. So I'm always interested in what you're thinking of futuristically. Tonight's not the time for that, but I do like looking at trends. And by then, hopefully, we'll all be retired. And I can only think, I hope I don't ever need that drone AED, but I want it to work. I do. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, sir.
Councilmember Bowen.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a few quick comments. I just want to say, I really just express my appreciation for all that you do and all the firefighters do. I am one of those calls for 2020 for the emergency medical service incident. And just want to give a shout out to the firefighters at Station 9. One of the fire stations that we're just talking about that needs upgrades, but they were able to respond to an emergency, and my son will never forget the experience and wants so badly to be able to touch the fire truck. So if
we can work that out,
I would love that. That goes with my second point is I think one of the things that I would love to see more, and I know that you do a great job of it already, but to increase partnership and close collaboration with our schools in San Leandro and community partners. When I was running programs for emergency preparedness for Clean Pack Lab, we actually went to one of the fire stations and did a family-friendly event where we had FEMA actually partner as well with Alameda County Fire, and we spoke to families, and the firefighters used the hose, and the kids got to get dressed up and stuff. And I think that just goes a really long way to deepen the partnership in the community, and really, especially for our youngest, be up close and personal with their heroes.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilmember Bowen. Thank you.
At this point in time, I see no other comments. I don't have any additional comments myself. Thank you for your good work.
Thank you
for
very
your
much.
presentation. What we're going to do at this point in time, before moving to item 8C on our agenda, I think we're going to take our break and then come back and try to push through to the end of our meeting. So right now I've got it marked at 8:11. If we can come back at 8, what time? 22. Set the timer for 11 minutes. We're in recess.
Press me up. Yeah. he pressed play. Then you-
Okay, let's gather up.
IT, are you ready?
Okay, so we are back in session. Our next presenter, or we're on agenda item 8C, presentation on possible 2024 revenue measure opportunities. We've got Deputy City Manager Eric Engelbart presenting to us today.
Okay, well, good evening, Mayor, members of the council, members of the public joining us tonight. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you all and provide this overview of potential revenue measure options. And just a brief overview of the slide deck that I'm about to present. We'll start off with a little bit of background information, highlight some of the fiscal challenges that we're facing as a city, and then provide a real overview of various revenue measure options. I think I would also note that this is a higher level overview and which kind of follows on the deeper dive on revenue measure options that you all may receiving that presentation back in February at your annual planning retreat. And then we'll discuss some of the cost implications, some factors to consider, and then plenty of opportunity for your feedback and questions. I think it's important on this conversation to start off with a little background. Many of you may be familiar with many of these measures, or for those who aren't, we're very fortunate here in San Leandro. The community has endorsed 6 tax measures, new or voter authorized tax measures over the past decade, which is quite significant. Taking a step back in time, back to November 2010, recall that was in the depths of the Great Recession. Voters initially authorized a 1/4-cent sales tax with a 7-year sunset provision. Fast forward 4 years later, that sunset was fast approaching, And so voters were kind enough to authorize an extension of that sales tax measure at a 0.5 cent rate for a 30-year period. And that's been absolutely just a very important source of revenue for our city. That's currently, Measure HH is currently generating over $14 million of direct general fund revenue. And that's been a huge lifeline for our city operations. Then in November of 2016, the voters authorized measures OOPPNN, which I would classify as some business license tax tweaks that basically authorize a parking lot tax, a modest increase to our hotel tax, as well as a cannabis business tax that's currently set at about 5% of gross receipts. Then fast forward November of 2020, in the depths of the pandemic, the voters also authorized an addition to our real property transfer tax that you can see on the screen there as well. Nevertheless, in spite of all this additional revenue that our voters have so generously authorized, the city still continues to face a number of financial challenges. Most of these items on the screen before you should be well familiar to you based on prior presentations you've received, but of course, examples include our deferred maintenance, capital projects needs, infrastructure needs. Of course, like virtually every other city here in California, we face a long-term structural deficit, a not insignificant portion of which is attributed to legacy pension obligations over which we really have no direct control in terms of the origins of those obligations, although we're making great efforts in addressing them. And of course, we're continuing to retain lean staffing levels. Of course, we at the staff level are grateful for the authorization of additional positions that were authorized as part of this current year budget. It just went into effect on July 1st. Nevertheless, our staffing levels still, even today, even with those augmentations, are still lower than they were over a decade ago prior to the Great Recession. And then, of course, this is a good dovetail on our prior presentation from our fire chief. Of course, we have very significant needs in the public safety space, including a number of our fire stations that are outdated and in need of complete reconstruction, including 3 of those stations in particular at a cost of approximately $15 million apiece. So with all that kind of groundwork laid, I think it's important just to provide a brief overview now of different types of revenue measure options that remain at our possible disposal for exploration over the next year or so. And those include general obligation revenue bonds, parcel taxes, or target business license tax modifications. And I do want to share that this is not a completely expansive list, but this is the types of things I think you've had a lot of conversations about, and this is in line with some of the feedback we received from you all back at that February planning retreat. And again, as a reminder, more detailed information on all these types of measures was provided at that meeting. So just a brief refresher on bonds. As you recall, there's kind of 2 core types of bonds here that many of us are familiar with. The first is the general obligation bond, and the second is what's known as a revenue bond. Of the 2, the general obligation bond, or the GO bond, is one that I think we'd be recommending at the staff level further exploring the feasibility of over the months ahead. As a reminder, though, they do require a 2/3 supermajority voter approval in order to be authorized, and all those other factors that you can see on the screen before you. Pivoting now to parcel taxes, as you recall, those are considered a special tax, and as a function of Prop 13, they also require a 2/3 supermajority vote of the public and voters in order to authorize them. Property valuation cannot be a factor in their structure, and typically the revenues are dedicated towards very specific purposes. So, for example, to the extent you all wanted to direct us to explore funding for the reconstruction of those fire stations or other infrastructure, that is an example of the type of measure that could fund that and be dedicated to those purposes. Now, with parcel taxes, there's also a variety of different structures. Of course, one we'll see often is either a flat rate per parcel, or rate based on the parcel size. There are some other creative solutions out there, such as based on the usage of public services, but they can get complicated when structured that way. Typically, all these measures do include a sunset provision, or basically a date of expiration when the tax would expire. And of course, we can bake into the structure that certain exemptions for at-risk community members. And just at a high level, this is very back of the napkin numbers, just to give you some examples. But for example, a tax based at that rate anywhere between $65 to $140 per parcel could generate anywhere between $3 to $6 million. With that, all that said, it's also important to remind you back in 2004, going back about 19 years ago, the city council did place a public safety parcel tax on the ballot. You can see all the details of it there, but at a high level, with the court, an important takeaway of that is that although a majority of voters in San Leandro supported it and voted to authorize that measure, that was well short of the 66.7% threshold that's required by law, and so the measure failed. And then I think it's also important, you've got a couple slides here providing some screenshots from our past scientific polling that was done back in 2019, which led up to the 2020 Measure VV measure that we all just talked about a few moments ago. But some key takeaways, there's a lot going on this screen. I'll just note in the lower right-hand corner, you can see this question was testing the viability of a $150 per single family residence tax. And you can see that was only at like mid-40s percentile. And then the next question that came up was, well, okay, rather than if 150 is not, what about $98? And that also is an important psychological threshold. And a lot of these measures, sometimes that 3 digits just makes a difference in people's minds as to whether or not they're willing to support it. So if we dropped it to $98 at that point in time, then you can see this likely support went up from the mid 40s up to the mid 50s. But again, still not enough to clear that 2/3 threshold that's required by law. And then the last question you can see here, it was dropped again to what if we dropped it to $79? Again, you can see support went up, approaching that 60% range, but again, still well short of that 66.7%. And ultimately, based on all that feedback and the other just feasibility and listening that we were doing to all the community residents, ultimately the council decided to pivot to a real property transfer tax, which only requires a 50% plus 1 majority, which was ultimately successful at that November 2020 election. Again, as I noted earlier, other possible tax structures that we could explore. One other area that we could continue to revisit would be just, do we want to explore changes to our business license tax structure? For example, as I mentioned earlier, we currently have a gross receipts tax on parking lots and cannabis businesses. Some other cities impose gross receipts tax on a whole range of other businesses. So that is something with your direction we could explore further, although I think it is worth noting that those types of structures are not without their trade-offs, including potentially disincentivizing economic investment, and they can be rather cumbersome and complex to administer and may require additional staffing, consulting. So with all that said, you can see here we've got their next 2 elections that are going to be happening here in San Leandro are basically March 5th of next year with the statewide primary, and then the main presidential election in November. Our recommendation at this juncture is, as we're just conducting this informational outreach and listening and feasibility assessment, is to really be focused more on that November election, because you could commingle it. It's called the consolidated election. It would also save costs substantially and would not require any kind of special findings, which would be associated with an earlier election. And now we get to the timeline. I won't go through these line by line, but at a high level, you can see here we are tonight in July of 23, kind of project launch, having this conversation with you all, garner your feedback. And then to the extent you direct us tonight to proceed forward further, the next big thing is really, again, there's just that community listening that we need to do, kind of working on that communication strategy, early listening sessions, and then conducting a poll in the fall, a scientific survey, similar to those results that I just showed you earlier, kind of test out where are the voters at now, what are their service area priorities and things of that nature. And then once we have those results, we report them back to you late in the year, early next year. Pivoting now to 2024, you can see a number of other steps there as well. Presuming we have those results in hand and the council continues to want us to proceed forward with further exploring, further conversations with the community, you can see a lot of those steps there, including in that early first and second quarter of 2024, where we're doing all those strategic conversations, stakeholder meetings, meeting with local service clubs, community groups, civic organizations, and then kind of also dovetailing that with our work online in terms of the digital sphere, in terms of web outreach, emails, online PSAs and whatnot. And all of that is kind of leading up to kind of our big deadline is that late July, in order to actually put a ballot measure in the ballot and send it over to the register of voters. That's due by the end of July, with election day there at the end of November. Of course, like any of these initiatives, and it is not without its own one-time costs. You can see these are very broad estimates. These are consistent with the past experience over those last 6 measures that we've done. And you can see there, of course, for the type of these are broken up into election-related costs and then other costs. And you can see the consolidated election, which is essentially the November 24 election, is the most cost effective as opposed to having a standalone special election, which would be much more expensive. And then, of course, you see these other expenses are related to, public outreach. You can see the public opinion survey. And to the extent if we did one this fall, that'd be about $42,000. And there's this optional, what's known as a tracking poll that could be done next year, sometime in the spring, perhaps, to tease things out further. And of course, informational mailers are a crucial part of this work as well as that kind of online work. And just kind of stepping back as we wrap up towards the end of this presentation, there's some other factors we just want to just remind you that are involved and at play with any type of revenue measure is, of course, as we've heard earlier this evening, that 2/3 supermajority is a very significant threshold. That's a hard one to get over. Of course, also city staff resources and staff time can't be used for that advocacy work. So a robust, the Yes campaign, Yes on the Measure is key to success. And that needs to be organized privately. As the old adage goes, a house divided cannot stand. And similarly, unified council support is also key, and understanding just what other measures are on the ballot, public perceptions, and all that community listening. And with that, happy to wrap things up with the presentation and answer any questions or hear your feedback or direction.
Efficiency of that presentation. What I'd like to do is then go down row here. Anybody interested, have questions, clarification sought? Councilmember Blue, please.
Mr. Mayor, I just have, thank you, Eric. I just have one question. You talked about the whole receipts taxes other communities use or different businesses. Do you have any examples of what the topics are? Are they doing like cigarette, gas, warehouse? What?
I think it runs the gamut. I mean, I believe that places like Fremont, actually, it's fairly expansive in terms of just a broad swath of businesses are subject to a gross receipts tax. It's just a structure of their business license structure, as opposed to ours, which is not typically based on gross receipts at all. It's more on employee counts and things of that nature. But it can range. It can run the gamut.
Thank you.
Member Aguilar, please.
Thank you, Eric, for this presentation. I think you talk more about the general obligation bonds versus the revenue bonds. I know we have over $300 million in infrastructure that we need to address, but also public safety with regards to the fire stations. I think we need to be creative here, and I think that in the past few years, a lot of our voters have experienced tax fatigue, and I think we have to be creative in the way that we pose this and how we go out for this. So I just kind of want to understand: do we go for a tax bond, or a general obligation bond, or a revenue bond? I just want to understand what our aim is.
Sure. I mean, I would suggest, as our next step, certainly, I think our big goal in to the extent you all are interested in some form of a revenue measure and want to direct us to proceed accordingly, I think a key important step over the next few months is really connecting with the voters and hearing what the voters are interested in, what's their service priorities, and then testing a variety of different structures, hearing the feedback, seeing what tests well. With that said, I will share that of these two, the general obligation bond is going to get us more horsepower, for lack of a better term, because the revenue bond essentially, and I don't classify myself as a complete expert on this, but essentially revenue bonds, you're not really creating new debt. You're basically just repackaging. Okay, so for example, we know we're expecting this amount of revenue, through our, say our water pollution control plan, or through the charges that folks are paying already. You could essentially bonding against that, borrowing against those future proceeds, so that you have a kind of a influx of cash, and then you can use it. But ultimately, you're not creating new debt, and that's why it's not subject to voter approval. Versus a general obligation bond, you're actually you're creating a new source of revenue that's beyond what your current revenue streams are, and that's why the general obligation bond tends to give you more.
I know there has also been chatter of a storage tax with regards to public storage facilities. And I should have asked you this earlier, but this just came to mind. Has there been any thought about that
I would share this. I do recall that came up as, I believe, an agenda item 14 referral a while back. It is certainly something with your direction, certainly something we could tease out or explore further. I would caution though that a tax that's that granular and so focused, it's unlikely to generate a lot of bang for the buck. It's really not going to resolve or generate the amount of revenue that's going to address all the needs that we have. In many ways, taxes like that often tend to be more of serve as an incentive point in some cases to maybe steer a business to a certain path of behavior or, steer or incentivize property owners to take certain steps, as opposed to something that's going to give us a big influx of revenue. So I would suggest at this point, that's something we could certainly explore further, but I would caution that that's not going to generate the kind of large scale dollars that we ultimately are needing if that's the direction the council directs us to.
Ultimately, I would like to see something in a package of infrastructure and public safety. That's just my my thought, but I would generally support this concept moving forward. I think we have a lot more talking to do and sessions to plan and get a lot of community input and feedback and conduct the surveys and partner with a consultant to see whether or not this is a good idea. Thank you.
I'd like to go to Councilmember Bowen, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Eric. The questions that Councilmember Egler asked actually were super helpful and were some of the questions I was going to ask. I think it's clear that we've all talked about, the realities that we can't give community the services they need if we can't fund it. And so we do really need to find some creative ways to be able to get revenue to be able to do the things. I really appreciate those thoughts about what's really going to be more bang for our buck, because kind of going after small bits of revenue will make people fatigued and will feel like here's another thing. And that's where my hesitation is really right now around all of this. But at the same time, I think that we are as a council really committed to infrastructure, like all of, when you look at last meeting's consent calendar, tonight's consent calendar, public safety, infrastructure, all of these things we're trying to do. So I think that we do need to figure out a way to be able to do that. And I think that piece about community listening is so important. And so I had a question around those fees. You can go to that. There was like one for 55,000 for an early consultant and 84,000 for this one. So in terms of being able to split it, is this once we've already decided to do something, or what's the next step in terms of the cost of even exploring this?
Sure, I could share this. I think to the extent that you all directed us to proceed forward with this exploration efforts, these estimates are kind of on an annualized basis, an estimate. It's not saying if you give us a green light to kind of proceed further that every single one of these costs is going to be accrued, but certainly a number of them, the public affairs strategy consulting assistance is certainly an area where we would be interested in proceeding forward. That's served the city well in past election cycles and just helping us navigate all that public outreach and listening work that we need to do. And certainly the public opinion survey. Again, we kind of baked in what I classify as the worst case scenario, though, which includes a scientific poll this fall, as well as a tracking poll in the spring, depending on which measure we're looking at in past cycles. We've always done at a minimum one scientific survey. The tracking poll is something we have not always done. And in some cases, that's the decision is made on that, whether to do the tracking poll based on where we're at that point, what we're hearing from the community, where we are in the process and things of that nature. So that second poll is certainly an area where we're not committed to doing that necessarily one way or the other just yet. And also some of the mailers and things of that nature as well. So these costs are kind of staged out over a period of time. So it's, again, we have some discretion there.
Just the surveys and having a public affairs consultant is critical, right? To figure out how to communicate out effectively and make sure that community understands why and what we're trying to do and the benefits of everybody. That is a wise investment. And just to clarify, without doing, let's say not having a bond measure, could we fund? How would we be able to fund repairs to the fire station? projects that we put in.
Sure. I think in the absence of new revenue measure, the general fund is the ultimate stopgap. But knowing that then that's becomes somewhat of a zero-sum game, and that, you know, more money carved out of the general fund for these types of things is less money for other general fund purposes.
Any other questions? Just one from me. Talked about 2/3 for general obligation bonds, also 2/3 for revenue bonds.
Well, with the revenue bonds may not even necessarily require voter authorization if they're not creating new debt.
So if I understood you correctly, the main conceptual challenge with revenue bonds is that there's no new revenue. It's simply pulling revenue from the future into the present. Your future obligations still remain.
Correct.
Other questions at this point in time, I'd like to turn to public comment, please.
Mr. Mayor, we have one public comment in person. It looks like we have one online. Craig Williams. You can just pull that microphone. Yep.
Craig Williams. I live down the street here, a long time San Leandro resident. I'd like to talk about how these measures relate to Prop 15. We lost Prop 15 a couple of years ago, but it was endorsed by Gavin Newsom, the Democratic Party, the progressive unions in the state, especially the teachers in the state. And they estimate that we lost $10 billion a year statewide. In San Leandro, that might amount to something like $25 million. This is per year that we possibly lost because of Prop 15. So, you know, because of that, and basically the logic behind this was that the share of taxes that commercial property paid went down from 44% to 28%. For residents, it went up from 56 to 72%. So the solution, and one of the things is called the Commercial Property Tax Documentation Project. And basically what the city could do is they could get the records from the county of the commercial property taxes and compare what they're paying for property taxes as opposed to what they would be paying based on the current property tax values. And you could do this through a company like DataQuick. DataQuick has all that information. So, you know, before we, you know, start the whole process, it would be only fair to the people of San Leandro to do a commercial property tax documentation project. The mayor talks about transparency, and this would be a form of transparency. And, you know, the average kid loses something like
Thank you. Your time is
$20 a day.
Ginny Madsen, you may unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. I just can't believe that there's been no mention about the Bay Area Housing Authority 2024 affordable housing bond that's going to be on the November 2024 ballot, because that could impact us. $10 to $20 billion bond. Thank you. I can be done.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, there's no further public comment.
That I will close public comment and turn to council member comments. Councilmember Blue, please.
Well, just two, I don't know that it would make a difference, but I'm sure everyone, it wouldn't surprise anyone here if I said if we raise the cannabis tax, I would not have an issue with that at all. But I don't think it's going to make up the gap that we're facing. I do need to go on record again publicly. The city manager knows this. I've had conversations with her that I cannot support any revenue measure for the city until the Neptune FEMA flood zone district is resolved and built. We have members in that 1,000 household range that are at max capacity or even past capacity to pay their bills, just their flood insurance bills now are making some of them have to do other things with their homes in terms of reverse mortgages, et cetera, especially the vulnerable population. And to add anything else onto their property tax plate or their annual plate is just not something that I can do in good conscience to represent that constituency. There's seniors and underrepresented community members, particularly in that 1,000 household area. So anything we need to do to get that FEMA flood zone done in the Neptune district will probably sway public comment. If we go into the public comment period, I imagine when we do the public listening circles, the people from the West End will come out and say the same thing because they've been saying it there and we've been echoing it for them. So I think there's two things at play there. They've been under the gun of the FEMA flood zone now for I think 5 years and are pretty dissatisfied that we haven't been able to deliver on anything. I know part of it's a county partnership, but to go down the road of a revenue measure at this point, the timing just isn't there for me to be able to support that right now. If for some reason we had a miracle and we can get that done, I think that people will see that they'll be very pleased with the work we've been doing recently as a city for infrastructure and capital things. And I think it'll be the timing will be probably good. The only other comment I have is I think we need to look and see whether the school district is planning any other revenue measures on their part. And I know that's always part of the conversation as well, Eric, when we're looking to move these things forward. Those are my comments, Mr. Mayor.
Vice Mayor, please.
Okay, yeah, my comments are just going to be brief. I'm not a big tax person and I don't really like raising the taxes on the community in San Leandro, but I want to hear from the community what they want, because it's not about what I want, it's about what the community wants. So we need to really listen to the community about this, because we do have one of the highest sales tax in San Leandro, 10.75. I don't think we can tax our way out of everything. So I really want to hear the community. Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Aguilar, please.
Thank you, Mayor Gonzalez. I think, like my council colleagues said, we do need to check to see what the school district is also planning if they have something on their agenda. But I think, we should take the next steps. We do have some unfunded projects, a lot of unfunded projects actually. And I think we need to do something here. The question is whether or not we go for a bond measure or some sort of tax measure in that sense. So I think, we can talk to our consultant and see what they recommend and what the community would support with regards to a tax measure. And I totally understand what my council colleague is saying with regards to the Neptune district. But I think, if there's a lot of benefit for this and pushing forth a tax measure, I'd like to get, a community buy-in before we do that. And, a poll that would say that, we would most likely have the support from our residents, or if we, do go for some sort of bond measure that we're able to support our infrastructure along with our public safety. Thank you. Those are my comments.
Seeing no other, I will go with my comments quickly. Obviously, if we choose to go with a bond measure of any kind, I'll just look down this row and say, we'll all need to be in it together. It's that simple. It will not work if we're not in it together. So we will work together to make sure that we can all live with whatever decision we choose to make. And that's our commitment to the public. And we will walk hand in hand. I do think that we must remember a couple of just facts that we've talked about before. We talked about it at our strategic planning session. I think Deputy City Manager referenced one of them, namely, oftentimes we hear these calls for, we need the city to be more efficient, tighten the belt, be more careful with the money. The truth of the matter is we have fewer employees than we did 15 years ago, even though the population of the city has grown. So we are literally serving more people with fewer employees. In terms of commitment and dedication to every effort to try to address things efficiently, you see that in the way that services are being delivered. I don't think that any of us up here from, based on all the discussions I've had in the last 6 months and even before that, I don't think any of us are tax people. We're not here just because we want to tax. But I think each of us is coming to realize that in many ways we've made some false promises or lack of commitment over a number of years, so that we are now in a position that we're not able to deliver on the things that we are supposed to deliver on. We have hundreds of millions of dollars of unfunded liabilities and obligations, roads that have fallen apart, not been repaired. So we recognize that, you know, we can't control what others have done before us, but we will be transparent and talk about the challenges that we face and say that in order to address those challenges, we need to hunker down and make some investments over the next, decade, 2 decades, so that we can get our city back to where it needs to be. Truly a fiscally sustainable city. And we can't be afraid of that. And I think what you're hearing up here is resolve. With respect to Councilmember Ballou's concern about the Neptune Drive assessment, we are, for the folks in the Neptune Drive area, know that we are working diligently with outreach to FEMA, because we recognize that there is a lot of value that can be unlocked there, in particular, if we are able to address those concerns. And we think that we're getting close, but obviously don't count those chickens until they're hatched. Certainly to Mr. Williams, thank you for the concern. I would be happy to speak with you anytime. I'm sure any of us would be willing to explore and better understand how, where those opportunities exist. In the end, I think we as a city need to recognize, we need to own that we need more revenue. And however you choose to frame that, it's not about finding ways to go and have lavish parties. It's about doing the basics, like paving our streets, making investments to prevent streets from falling apart, because it's harder to repair a broken street than it is to maintain one. So those are the things that we will be focused on. We will continue to make that investment. We're proud of that decision that we've made as a council to focus on these priorities. We do not want fire stations that collapse on our firefighters in a big earthquake, because we know the big earthquake is coming. I think we recognize that. You voted for us to recognize what the challenges are. We've identified them. We are working to address them. And I don't think that we're going to be embarrassed to ask the city to work together with us to address those challenges. So those are my thoughts. And I think we will now move on to our next agenda item. We have worked through our consent calendar, which is represented in items 9 through 11. There is no public hearing today, so let's move to item 13 on our agenda, please. So here we're going to have a resolution to approve the 2023 council member handbook. We've got our Madam Clerk who will be presenting this to us.
Evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I present to you tonight the city council handbook update. Tonight's agenda, we're going to talk about the updates that have been made. There's been some administrative changes and enhancements. Some of them have stemmed from city council referrals, and some of them have come from rules committee suggestions. There will be 4 discussion items, and then there's going to be some actions that we have to take on those discussion items. The updates that we're talking about tonight, we are including the city council handbook, which is the guiding document for city council. There have been some outdated processes and procedures that were in the handbook that needed to be updated to be in line with what current practice is. We also did some amendments to reflect council member referrals. And then also it went to Rules Committee a few times. And from that, we updated those issues. There was also minor grammar and spelling issues that have been edited. And most importantly, we updated the handbook to be ADA compliant and in line with the digital age. The administrative changes and enhancements that have been made are the modern format upgrade. There now are clickable links on the table of contents. So it's in a digital format. So you can just find the keywords and sections you're looking for. You can also hit Control F and search and find exactly the pages you're looking for. The order and the flow have been updated to make it a more cohesive document. So it's not so piecemealed together. And items have been updated, such as the appendices, instead of having them as a separate document as an appendix A, B, or C. Some of that has been rolled into the document itself. Again, going back to changing the order and the flow. Some referrals and Rules Committee suggestions that have come out. There was a recommendation for general powers and responsibilities of council to be updated to have more robust language. You can find that on page 8. The role of the vice mayor, that language has been updated, and that will be a discussion item. That is on page 9. The city council serving on other agencies is on page 10. Urgent referrals, we talked about at rules a couple times, and that will be on page 13. Requests for proclamations also found on page 13. Council chambers expectations of decorum on page 19. Council actions also on page 19. Council member correspondence found on page 37, and the city council agenda order to be changed to the flow that you've been practicing lately can be found on page 23. And then boards and commissions updates, we made that more current, can be found through pages 47 through 59. I'm not going to go through this entire guide, but this is the guide where you can find the edits comparing the documents that were included as your attachments from the original book to the new concise plan. And as you can see, we have 5 discussion items. One of them is selection and role of the vice mayor. So we can find that on page 9. Then we have requests for future agenda items and urgent referrals that will be found on page 13. Reimbursement for expenses, which includes technology, travel, training, and apparel allowance. Those are found on pages 14 through 16. We'll talk about regular meetings found on page 17 and closed sessions also on page 17. So let's begin with the discussion items. So discussion item number 1, we have selection and role of the vice mayor on page 9. So I'm not going to read all of these, but it was just talked about that an election year incumbent candidate may not serve as vice mayor, and the vice mayor will be subject to resignation if they run for election. Ballot designations may not use the words vice mayor, and you may not use the word vice mayor for campaign purposes. So things to consider are the vice mayor is an appointed position. Does it affect other seats representing San Leandro? Can the vice mayor run for mayor? And there was no specific Rules Committee recommendation, so this is a discussion item. Do we want to discuss it now or go through all the discussion items and then come back?
Why don't you go to full set, then we'll go item by item.
Go
So
through
the full
Mhm.
set of
Okay.
discussion items.
Yep. Okay. The next discussion item is requests for future agenda items and urgent referrals. So currently, it's been added that requests are added to the priority list, and urgent referrals include life, health, and safety of community, legislative and finance consequences to the city. And they will require a 2/3 vote, which is actually 5 members of the council and not the typical majority, which would be 4. Things to consider is, do they have to meet the minimum criteria to move forward? A supermajority approval ensures that there is council support. There was no specific Rules Committee recommendation. Again, why it's a discussion item. For closed session meetings and regular meeting times, the discussion was should closed session meetings be shorter, and should the time start later at 5:30 or 6 p.m. and should regular meetings move from 6:30 or start at 7 p.m. So things to consider is that starting later only gives you time to talk about one thing during closed session, and it may result in more closed session meetings. And for changing your regular session meeting to 7 p.m., meetings previously were at 7 p.m. and were moved to 6:30 to accommodate the public. Having an earlier start time accommodates lengthy meetings, and it also encourages public participation. Then the last discussion item is travel and training. So there's been a discussion because of cost of living increases and inflation that the annual increase, there should be an increase to the annual training and travel budget. Currently, it is $10,000 for the mayor, and it should go up to $15,000. And the council members is $7,000, and it should go up to $10,000. With a lower training budget, you're limited to what you can and cannot attend. So having it higher, maybe the discussion is to limit it to only conferences and legislative activities only. There's a discussion potentially about gifting unused funds, and then having end of year reporting, including costs. And it would be reported on the consent agenda. And then the considerations, again, for that are cost of travel has increased. It creates a more educated council, and unused funds could be gifted or possibly rolled over if somebody is unable to use their funds that year. Then it also increases transparency because it shows where the money is spent when the report is included on the council agenda. And that is it.
Okay, so the way I'd like to handle this item, because you've shared this with us in our agenda packet beforehand for us to review and consider. I'd like to take questions, clarifying questions, truly just exploring, do you mean this or do you mean that, right? Those sorts of questions. Then I'd like to move to public comment, and then we will engage in our discussion item by item.
And I would like to note that during the discussion, the direction given to me, I will type out, and then I will display it on this screen after, before we take a vote, so that we'll have whatever the decisions are displayed up here so we can do one vote.
Thank you. So at this point in time, council members, are there questions where you'd like to clarify some of what's been discussed thus far? Okay, at this point in time, then let's move to public comment. Do we have any comment on the handbook?
Going to be 1 second. I have to stop sharing my screen.
Certainly.
Okay, I see one comment from Christopher Bammer. There's no public comment in person. IT, if you can get the timer ready. Thank you. Christopher Bammer, you may unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So I mentioned it earlier and I'll mention it again, and I'm sure I'll get ignored just like I have been for 5.5 years. If you're gonna move the consent calendar every time we have a meeting to the top of the agenda, now is the time to do it officially. I mean, come on, like I said, the city council meeting is for the citizens. You just said it yourself. We changed the time to accommodate the citizens to get more public participation. But you alter the agenda to benefit you to have an efficient meeting. Efficient means we don't have to listen to what the public has to say because we don't like their decorum. Well, I think it's fucked up and you need to fix it. Now's your chance.
Thank you.
Is that our last public comment?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, there is no further public comment.
I will close public comment. And I think our agenda packet, if I'm not mistaken, shows that the new structure of our meetings will place the consent calendar at the top. So consistent with the public commenter's observation.
It is on page 23 of the new council handbook.
So what I'd like to do at this point in time is go item by item where you're looking for our input, and just take each of those. We'll take council member input and see if we can reach consensus on what that guidance would be.
Let me share my screen again. Okay, yeah, I can do that. IT, if you can share my screen, please. Okay, so discussion item number 1 would be selection and role of the vice mayor found on page 9.
Councilmember Reyes, please.
Great. I wanted to kick off the discussion on this item because I was the person in rules who suggested that we put this rule in, and I wanted to just state some of the reasons. I noticed in the last 2 election years when there was a discussion about vice mayor, there was reference to this as an unwritten rule. So when people were discussing appointments, they were saying that there's an unwritten rule that you can't be vice mayor during an election year. I think that as a general rule, unwritten rules should be written down. And so I felt that this was a good way to capture it. And I just want to note that the way that it's written, it is written so that you can't use vice mayor in an election that is like in San Leandro because it's an appointed position. But if you are running for like state or whatever, like a different position, you can use it. Because I've seen, we've seen other cities have their vice mayors, even if appointed, use those titles in when seeking higher office. So this would just apply to San Leandro elections. Thank you for pulling up the section.
Is there anything else that was? Are you finished? Yeah, it was good. Perfect background. Thank you. Councilmember Aguilar, please.
Thank you. I think on page 8, under the selection and role of the vice mayor, the last sentence, the title vice mayor should not be used on any official ballot designation. I think that we need to be a little bit clear that it only pertains to San Leandro city office.
I'm understanding you, a City of San Leandro.
City of San Leandro.
Election.
Yes.
So how would you like to track these? I know you were talking about hyping up, and so if you can just track it, then we'll see if we have general consensus. But I think there's a desire for a clarification. Let's kind of get them all up there, and then we'll look for consensus. Or an election in the city of San Leandro.
Yes.
Or a City of San Leandro election. We're talking about paragraph 3 of that section, sentence of the extra clause. Councilmember Baloo, please. I'm sorry, Councilmember Aguilar, were you finished? Yes, perfect. Councilmember Baloo.
So while we're on this, I missed the rules committee that we talked about this very particular thing. The only question I have is what about how another candidate would address being endorsed by someone who is currently the vice mayor? Because this handbook would not necessarily apply to a candidate who has not been elected. So Vice Mayor Azevedo is the vice mayor this year, and someone is running for District 7 in San Leandro for city council, and they say, I'm endorsed by Vice Mayor Brian Azevedo. Is that okay?
Interesting question. You have a perspective on that.
I just think it's something we should talk about. We maybe can't control how they list us, but we can be clear if we're the vice mayor when we endorse that they have to be, the endorsement has to say he's council member instead of vice mayor, if that's the will of this council. I have no strong preference either way. I'm not a believer that endorsements win elections, but I think we should have a convo about it.
Can I ask one clarifying question? Are we talking about for running for a City of San Leandro seat, or if, say, somebody was running for the San Leandro School Board?
All of them. What if someone's running for Alameda City Council and we're the vice mayor in that year? I mean, it means it's a ceremonial title for us mostly, but for others in the community, they may not understand that. So I don't know if it's something we want to talk about further or whether we just let it go.
Discussion. Goes on your list as a discussion item. Fine. I'm going to come back around. Any other commentary, questions, concerns, desire to tweak? Councilmember Bowen. Oops, I punched you out. So if you can go ahead one more time.
Yeah, I guess, and would it be helpful also to add, if this section is for selection and role of the vice mayor, how we choose the vice mayor, and if we have if the vice mayor the same vice mayor can be elected or designated every year, if they could, the subsequent years, like we could have vice mayor Azevedo all 4 years if that's what we voted to do.
I think the language allows that right now.
So are you asking that we add language to clarify it?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
Do we want to talk about suggested language at this time?
I'd like to go back to your list very quickly where you were taking notes. Okay. Are there any other items that people want to raise? Because I want to kind of focus now our discussion on this item. Okay, so let's then go to, if you may.
Just ask one more clarifying question.
Certainly.
For Councilmember Aguilar's item, he proposed to add clarifying language of which election you can not use the term vice mayor. Again, I want to ask if that includes outside elections. So somebody running for the San Leandro School District, could they say I'm currently the vice mayor for San Leandro?
Councilmember Aguilar, would you like to clarify your thoughts on that?
Yes, I don't see a problem with other elections. It's just, and pertinent to the city.
Looking down my council to just see if trying to gauge the reaction, because right, this is a live discussion in the formality of the chambers, but still looking for any concerns. You can turn on your microphone, please.
Yeah, is this better? I would say that my intention in bringing this up and my understanding when it was in rules is that it was just going to be applying to San Leandro City Council elections. So that was my understanding. So I would agree with Councilmember Aguilar's clarification there personally.
I think that what I'm hearing and looking at some of the head nods, that's like a capital C, capital S, capital L, as in the City of San Leandro, elections, as opposed to citywide elections.
Sentence I have right now says the title vice mayor shall not be used on any official ballot designation in the City of San Leandro.
It needs to say for a city
council
because there's elections for all sorts of things. I think that would. And I just maybe to clarify for the council's purposes of discussion, it sounds to me like the debate is, should the vice mayor title be allowed to be used only for purposes of city business? Or are you allowed to use it for any other campaign purposes outside of the City of San Leandro Council elected seat? That to me is what I'm hearing, the designation you're trying to debate.
But to be clear, what I heard in rules and what I think I've heard here is that we are, I think, in agreement that for a legal entity, City of San Leandro election for its boards, commissions, anything that's going to involve voting for a city position, City of San Leandro position, that designation would not be used by a candidate. I also heard reference to a question raised about endorsement. So endorsed by. And I don't feel like I've got clarity on that element in terms of consensus, trying to distill a consensus here. So would we like to permit, as a council, would we like to permit someone with the title of vice mayor to let that endorsement be used in a legal entity, City of San Leandro election? Councilmember Aguilar, please.
Thank you, Mayor Gonzalez. I think the controversy is in regards to City San Leandro election, that the vice mayor title should not be used as a leveraging point to gain you a seat as a council member if you're running for re-election, just for a city council race. It can be used for school board. That's what my general perception or what I would like to see. But also if I am vice mayor, I endorse a candidate for assembly or state senate, and I am vice mayor, that title may and shall be used because I am nominated by my peers or appointed by my peers to be in that role. I don't see a point why we shouldn't use it.
Councilmember Reyes.
What about, okay. I think endorsements are complicated because it's then it's to some degree controlling a third party on what they put on their like pamphlets and materials. Like I don't know how we would enforce it. Like here, we're saying you automatically resign if you are trying to use it in a ballot designation. But if someone is trying to endorse another person, like even if we wanted to control that, like it would kind of be on the honor system, right? Because what kind of consequence could we impose on that? So I don't know where I stand on whether endorsements from the vice mayor should be allowed. Like I think they should, but regardless, I don't think there's a way to control that. I mean, maybe we could put something, if it was the will of like the majority of the people here that it should be used, we could put something like vice mayors are discouraged from using their title in endorsements. But yeah, I don't know. That's just my feeling there. I'm kind of ambivalent, I guess is what I'm saying.
So quickly coming down the line, I'm looking for a thumbs up. Yes, permit endorsement, or a thumbs down, don't. Kind of getting some mixed fingers here. Looking for some of my other council members to weigh in. Vice Mayor, please.
All right, I might be the lone one on this, but I think this is all overreach. You get appointed by your colleagues, your elected office, so you should be able to use it for what you want. To me, it's overreach. And that's what some cities do. Thank you.
Okay, so what I think I'm hearing, I'm gonna look for violent disagreement here. No violence, please. What I think I'm hearing is that shall not be used for a city of San Leandro election, where it's the San Leandro city government. It can be used for endorsement purposes in a non-city of San Leandro government election, or even for the city of San Leandro election. Councilmember Aguilar, please.
I would personally, I would leave it to a San Leandro specific for city council race.
So you would recommend that the endorsement not carry that title?
No, the endorsement carried the title, but that vice mayor cannot be used on the ballot for city council
So
race.
you'd say endorse is okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I think we're going to leave it at that. That we're going to go silent on any prohibitions on endorsement. So what have we not resolved on this item? Like to show us the language? Is there one open item?
Mayor, can we maybe just restate the concept and then you'll get the actual language back when you go to adopt? We can try to write language tonight, but I always recommend against that if we're going to get into this level of detail.
Okay, that's fine. So do we have though what we think the concept is that you were, because you came to us and said, here's some discussion points, and I just want to make sure that we have given the guidance clearly, and if so, if we can restate the guidance back.
Yeah. So Councilmember Aguilar would like to add clarifying language of which election the ballot designation, and then it's only for the city of San Leandro and it's not applicable to other elections. So the sentence to be edited shall read, the title vice mayor shall not be used on any official ballot designation in the city of San Leandro for a city council election. And then we can fine tune it later.
Okay, Councilmember Aguilar.
After reading that last paragraph, I think we should just strike the last sentence.
I agree. That fixes it. And then I just want to comment, I think I heard you want us to add language to clarify there's no limit on consecutive vice mayor appointments. So we'll find a way that you could be vice mayor for 4 years. I don't, it's okay, it's allowed. Okay, so no add language, we're going to strike a sentence.
To clarify, which sentence are we striking?
Third paragraph, the title vice mayor shall not be used on any official ballot designation. Because the first sentence is clear about that it's for San Leandro City Council office only.
Thank you. So Councilmember Aguilar, is there anything else, or you think you're set there?
There is, I am looking, I should have wrote this down and tracked it, but there is specific language with regards to compensation or reimbursement that you have to report out, but also submit a written report. I'd like to put and or give a report out or submit a written report. The language indicates that you need to report out and submit a report. That's just redundancy. And I found it. I didn't jot it down, but I'll figure out where it is on what page.
At this point in time, I think I'd just like to track that. And if you can also track that, Madam Clerk, got City Manager tracking it. And I'm going to look down the dais here. The point being that a report should be sufficient, whether it's orally in chambers or in writing, and that it need not be both. Looking at the head nods, I see no disagreement, so let's move that forward with that as direction.
Can I clarify though, are we done talking about the vice mayor? We're moving on to the next discussion item?
We are done talking about Vice Mayor. We're moving on to the next discussion. And on the way to that next discussion item, we introduced this little spur on the railroad.
Okay, that's okay. I took note, so we'll come back to that. The next discussion item is request for future agenda items and urgent referrals found on page 13.
So if I'm understanding correctly, this is the planned language.
Correct. This is the proposed language that came out of Rules Committee.
So then the guidance that you're seeking is whether there is anything that this council would like to change in that language, correct?
That is correct.
So if they're fine with it, we can just do the head nod. So I'm getting a lot of head nods, so I think we're fine there.
Let me take a note. Okay, the next item is closed session meeting start time and regular meeting start. We can start with closed session start.
So at this point in time, I'll go to Councilmember Reynes, please.
Thank you. I know this seems like a small thing, but I feel very passionately about this item. City council members are not paid. We can't do this as a full-time job. We can't do this as a part-time job, even given our stipend. So unless we're retired or independently wealthy, we're working. And most work is going to be like 9 to 5, sometimes 10 to 6, 9 to 5:30, that sort of thing. And you have a commute. And so I think it's really important that in terms of getting equity and like diversity on the city council itself, it's important to move these times back. I think it's also important for public participation. We say all the time about how we wish we had more people here on city council. I know it was initially moved with the intention of creating more public participation, but the fact is that if you're coming back from work and you need to get dinner on the table, you need to find childcare and perhaps pop over to City Hall for something that you care about, you can't really do that if your work ends at 6 and the meeting here starts at 6:30. So I would be open to a lot of solutions if we need to have meetings, more frequently to get them shorter. If we're starting later, I'm open to that. But I do think a 7 o'clock start time would really serve the purposes of equity both on council and in who we get participating here. So yeah, I feel very passionate about moving it back. I would love to see what other people are thinking.
Okay, so let's go to Councilmember Aguilar next.
I completely agree with my council colleague. I think, as somebody who does have a day job and works 9 to 5 or 8 to 5, there are times where, I don't have time to go home. Sometimes I just come straight to city council meetings or various other meetings, committee meetings in my work clothes, because I don't have time to change. And, working in the construction industry, I have a uniform that I wear and it's not a suit. So I think that given this pushback in time, it would allow someone like myself to go home, shower, get dressed, and come to the meeting in business casual attire rather than showing up in my daytime work clothes.
Member Bowen.
I think that pushing it back is super helpful to be able to manage the day job, the kids, and then coming to council. I don't know if we necessarily need more meetings. I would have to push back on that one. I think that would make it even harder to do all of those things. But I think that, this council and the mayor is doing a good job of trying to make our meetings more efficient. And, oftentimes I think that when we don't have as much discussion here, it's also because we've had a lot of discussion behind the scenes. And I think that the fact that we are incredibly communicative with each other and are able to air differences, I think that that's been really helpful. And I think that if we can continue to work on those things to make our meetings more efficient, I would just, continue to support and promote and advocate for that.
So Member Baloo, please.
I am retired, but I still find it incredibly challenging to get to all the meetings on time, especially closed sessions that start at 5:30 this time of year during the fall season. I think because I'm repurposed and I have to be on the field. I also think that I should give acknowledgement to our city manager, our city attorney, who over the past year or two have really increased efficiency of closed session meetings, especially Rich, by giving us a brief, the day before or that morning so we can actually read and come prepared. And I think it really has cut down on meeting time and has improved meeting efficiency and coming to consensus. So I hope we can continue that practice. Not really a big fan of more meetings if they're needed. That's fine. The question I have is, can we legally have closed sessions on Zoom? Or no, they have to be, okay, because we have to have that public comment piece. So that would have been a nice option, but I think moving it back does make it a little more accessible for the public, especially the structure that we have for the meetings where the presentations are early in the meeting. If kids are getting presentations, it's early on a school night, et cetera. So I would be for moving it back to starting at 7 if that's acceptable by my colleague.
Vice Mayor, please.
My, excuse me. My question is, are we going to keep the 10 o'clock stop time where we have to approve it since the meeting's going to start later? We're not going to get as much done.
Okay, so a couple of thoughts, because I think it's an interesting question. I think in the handbook, we still keep it at 10 o'clock, the draft, with the idea that we should be able to get our business done in 3 hours. Twice a month, plus a work sessions. It's 9 hours of coming together to talk about things. So I think that's the hope. I would note that previous council through ordinance changed the start time of our meetings. So the guidance, we would just be offering guidance, come back with an ordinance that changes the start time back to what it used to be. It will come in the form of an ordinance, but what we will do is that's the guidance that we are offering staff coming out of this. And I see that fairly uniform with an understanding or recognition that we are being more efficient and that hopefully we don't need to extend our ending time. We do have a mechanism for extending the ending time that has remained unchanged. I think it's exactly the same as it was before. The last thought is that we haven't exactly addressed closed session start time. And so my recommendation would be that as a general principle, we have closed session starting at 6 p.m. And that if we need to, because we have a significant set of matters that we might pull it back to 5:30, that we default to a 6 p.m. start time. I'm going to kind of look down the dice here, looking for some head nods or disagreements. The general sense that I'm getting is a yes. If anybody objects, please speak up. Seeing no objection, we will move our closed session to a 6 p.m. start now. We need an ordinance for that as well.
No, Mayor, you do not need an ordinance for special meetings in closed session. We only need an ordinance for the regular meetings, which are the first and third month.
Thank you for the clarification. Until we have an ordinance to move our regular start time, I would expect that we will still leave the plenty of time so we have an either 5 or 5:30 start time. And that when we adjust, we will adjust our regular session, we will correspondingly adjust our closed session. Okay, our next item for discussion, please. Oh, yes. Sorry.
When are we looking for this to be in effect? What month are we
So
thinking?
we need to draft an ordinance. Do you think that would be able to come back?
The first meeting in September. Second reading in September. So it will go into effect early October. Most likely not the first meeting in October.
Is it a 30-day?
30 days from the second reading.
So approximately October 17th-ish.
We want to start in January or okay, we start in October.
That's the soonest. It'd go on the 17th, but it's up to. Is it too late?
Would not be effective until the first meeting in November, the way the calendar 30-day requirement. Your second reading would be on September 18th. Your second meeting in October is October 16th. So it would be effective the first meeting in November.
Could have it on the 17th. I'm looking at the city clerk. It's an easy ordinance to draft. I'm looking at the city manager.
Yeah, it's just a quick turnaround time because packet day is Wednesday this week. The day after.
I guess let me look to my council very quickly. I think what we're hearing right now is that this would be, as a practical matter, effective November, first meeting in November. Are we fine with first meeting in November for our new time schedule? You have a question from Councilmember Baloo?
Process questions. What if the turnaround time was Thursday and that was acceptable by the council? Would that change anything?
To have to receive the council packet Thursday?
I don't know if that would change anything for you, but the second question is, if we called the next few meetings special meetings, is there a requirement to have it as a regular meeting? Are we going to conduct any business that requires it to be a regular meeting? If we called it a special meeting, but we notice the public that we're starting later, Can we go down that road while we're waiting for this ordinance to take effect, or is a regular and special meeting the same?
No, regular meetings are different from special meetings. The regular meetings, for example, you can only have second readings of ordinances at regular meetings.
Can you have a first reading at a special meeting?
Could have a first reading at a special.
Oh, maybe we look at that and see if we can shorten that timeline into October. Again, if it's important to the council, I'm flexible either way.
And that's what I'm trying to figure out as I look down Council Row here. Is the beginning of November okay? Okay, so let's just stick with that plan, just for purposes of simplification. I think let's move on to our next discussion item.
Okay, the next discussion item is travel and training budget, page 15. Really, it starts on 14.
I know that you have provided this to us before in written form. We have a red line form. Is there something in particular that council members would like to discuss, to explore around the changes that have been made as shown in the red line? So Councilmember Aguilar, please.
Thank you for this. And earlier I spoke out of order in the sense of where we're at on the handbook. I found the item that I was talking about. It's on page 14, item B, under item E. Upon return from a conference or reimbursable travel, council members and the mayor must report out at the subsequent meeting a trip report or submit a written report. I would like to change the and to or on that.
Councilmember Owen, please.
A quick question around when, so if we're getting the packet on Wednesday, is that, and so that's when this will go into effect, correct? Or we're making these changes, for example, the increased travel stipend and pay, when does that?
Manager, if you could clarify.
So we'll bring this back for approval next week.
We can do that. I've already drafted the resolution that's included in this meeting. So would we continue the item? We can continue it.
And it's just a resolution.
Correct. It's just
Okay.
a resolution.
So if we get it back to you next Monday, the 17th, you would approve it by resolution and it would be effective immediately.
Understood. Then we can go to the section on the technology stipend and the travel stipend. There's a the line at no time shall be fiscal year 20 except the first 6 months of their inaugural term. Is it possible for us to extend that by like 90 days or however much time, just because this is for example, my inaugural year and I've not been able to expense the amounts for my technology needs yet. And so this wouldn't I wouldn't be able to utilize those funds for this year's because it would have already have passed 6 months from January 1st.
Legally, yes, we just need to include language here that could say, with the exception of the 2023 newly elected officials, they shall have until November, whatever date you pick. And then that would give us proper guidance to administratively provide you that reimbursement. Rich can give us words for that, if that's the council's will to add it.
Looking down Council Road to see if there's any concern on that specific item, because I've got a queue here, if I could go with a little bit of thumbs up, thumbs down, sideways, whatever for council member. Okay, so we've got consensus on that item. Please proceed accordingly under that guidance. Are you complete with your thoughts, Councilmember Bowen? Okay, perfect. I'm moving to Councilmember Blue.
Two things. Thank you. The first one is a cousin to what we just talked about. I think, and I don't have an answer and I don't have a recommendation, but I think we need to look at that 2,100 per year. I think it might have been that for a while. And I think costs now for technology, when you take out the phone, the $75 a month for the phone, which we're paying, that's an average computer if you're buying a Mac or so. I think we need to look at that amount, maybe increase it a little bit. I know we increase everything else, the cost of living of the city every year. We could business license go up, fees go up, blah, blah, blah. Perhaps we should backtrack that and see if that's reasonable. I don't know, compared to other cities, or I don't want to create a bunch of busy work for staff. But I know this fiscal year, I'm going over that. I know it. It's with the phone and travel and traveling and the phone, paying for the phone hotspot in other countries, et cetera. I'm sure I'm going to be over that.
Councilmember Blue, I would prefer just the council to make a recommendation on the number you'd like us to increase it by.
Up to 2,500, up to 3,000. I don't know. I don't know if anyone else is having the same. Yeah, I'm seeing 3,000 maybe is reasonable. And the other, my second, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm going to look for a consensus. So I hear 3,000, replace the number 2,100 with 3,000. I'm looking for reaction from council. I think I've got enough of a yes consensus to provide that guidance into our final document, please. Just turn on.
Can you clarify that? So that would be 3,000 per physical year.
Yeah, so where it says 2,100.
I see that. Okay, so it's
3,000.
My second concern, and I don't, I know these are all big preference issues, but there's a section that recommends being able to gift your unexpended travel allowance to another council member. I think carrying it over year to year is fine, because I think that flies within the intent of the public in understanding our travel and our training needs and costs. But I think being able to gift it to another council member, it could become problematic down the road and be seen in a negative light if there's whatever, I just think it has the potential for being abused or for clicking to occur. Or, I mean, if it were to give it to the mayor, because the mayor was really out, and I know our previous mayor traveled out of the country, she did so at the expense of the other hosts of Italy and China. They paid for it. But there could be an opportunity of something where something comes up and the mayor may go over their travel budget. I think if we had the opportunity to gift it to the mayor, that would be one thing, because the mayor is representing the city as a mayor. I think being able to gift your leftover travel funds to another council member would be seen as an equity issue and possibly create some problems in the public's eye. It certainly would cause me heartburn if I were in the public and saw something I didn't think was fair.
So again, you've got the floor. So what is your recommendation? Then we can look.
My recommendation is I'd like to hear if that causes heartburn for anyone else, or whether I'm missing something that other people might know or have experience with, or know other electeds that have done this, and that's why it was brought in as a suggestion.
So recognizing that the queue that I've got here probably isn't aligned to that particular comment, question, suggestion, I'm going to go to raised hands and just come on down the line and ask you to unmute yourselves. Councilmember Reynes.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It might be useful, Mayor, for you to clarify, because I think this was something that you introduced in rules. But for my part, I like it. I like the idea of being able to gift it, but I think the question is like how it's gifted. I agree with Councilmember Baloo that if it's just an individual, like if I were to say to Councilmember Bowen, hey, I have like $8,000 left, let me give it all to you. I think that would cause the problem that I think you're identifying. I'm wondering if we could maybe preserve the effect of it, but like take away the side effects by like putting it into a pot and having the city manager like equally dole it out by need or something. That if someone at the end of the year had, like for me, I have a new child, I'm not going to be traveling very far this year. So if all 10,000 or whatever of my dollars went into a pot and then was distributed as needed or equally or in some way that that way it's not an individual giving into an individual, it's just going back into the pot.
I will come back to city manager to get her thoughts on willingness to dole and arbitrate and all that, but I'm going to come down the line to see if there's any interest in commenting. There's not a requirement to comment. Go ahead, Councilmember Aguilar.
I think that I've went over budget. I think with the cost of living inflation, hotels are 40% more expensive. So are flights. It's, you know, I've paid almost double to go to DC, and planned well ahead of time to search for flights. So I think, you know, if there's a conference, you know, I think I'm at a few $1,000s that I paid out of my own pocket for city benefit, to represent the city and have reported out and have not, you know, was not able to get reimbursed because I, you know, went over my budget. And, you know, it would be nice if, you know, Councilmember Berlew, if we were to have to say, hey, Victor, I have X amount of dollars, I can help cover the rest of the expenses for you to get reimbursed. That would be great. But I can see if the full amount of $8,000 is gifted to another council member, that would cause some heartburn in that sense. So I think, you know, it should be based on a conference basis, and should, I think, you know, hey, we brought up at a city council meeting that Councilmember Baloo has X amount of dollars to use for Victor, and we have to plan ahead of time to pay for this trip because he went over budget. I think that would make more sense and would have more transparency with the public to understand how the travel funds are being spent if somebody does go over budget and has to attend a meeting. Like, I'm in a leadership role in National League of Cities, so I have to travel a lot, and I can easily blow my budget. I'm very mindful of my cost, but when we're in leadership position, it costs time and money to travel. And I think, you know, upping this and having that option should, you know, I think this should be on a conference by conference basis, whether or not somebody wants to gift, you know, a portion of their unused travel funds.
And obviously, thank you for the leadership roles you're playing nationally. Councilmember Bowen.
Yeah, I think that, you know, now that we are increasing the amount, hopefully it will not be as much of an issue, but I think the nuance, I understand your point, Councilmember Baloo. I think there are just some situations that will come up where council members, for example, this year you know, have a smaller budget because the previous council member used a certain percentage of it. So then I attended a mandatory, or not, I guess I didn't have to, I did have the new council conference and the National League of Cities, and that pretty much was the entire travel budget. And I think the idea of the travel budget and for training is so that we can be a more educated council, and we can take on leadership roles, and we can be better public servants for the community. And so if it's to be able to help supplement other people's training if we aren't able to, but I do agree that it should be conference. And again, we're already putting that into the language that it really should be for training and for conferences to be able to come back and use these things that we will be able to share with our other council colleagues and hopefully come up with great policies for the community.
Any others on this particular topic? I'm going to wind it up and get what I think is our understanding. Yes. Okay. Punch in. If you can punch in, Vice Mayor.
Okay, yes, I have something that I believe that should have been added to this that Councilmember Simon put earlier, where there was going to be an annual raise in here for the council members, and I believe we'll get support for that. A 5% annual raise, I believe. I'm not sure exactly much, but yeah. So I wanted to see this included. Handbook.
Okay, so I'm going to come back to that in just a second. I do have it on my list as well. Thank you. No worries, no worries. So on this notion of cost, what I think I hear from a council consensus perspective is that we go ahead and we take the excess amounts, the unspent amounts, where people are not able to avail themselves of the opportunity to travel for training or leadership positions and the like, and that money be put into a pool such that for permitted purposes, namely council training, legislative purposes, conferences, as called out in the handbook already, that unspent money could be used to cover those valid purposes. We'll take a pause and see if I've got a head nod, which I think I do. I'll turn to city manager. Is that guidance clear? Are there clarifying questions between you and city clerk?
The guidance is clear. I would ask the council that our language in the handbook will be less, which will drive us to an administrative process internally, because this pool concept will have to be manually managed. And so for me to go through all the details and nuances, I'd rather come back to you with that sort of, but I understand the concept that you have a pool of money. It's intended for travel training and it may be delegated
into the
pool. It's how it comes out of the pool that I'll bring back to you at the administrative level.
And then city attorney, please.
Just to be clear, my recommendation is we're going to take the concept of gifting out of the language we put in so far, just to completely protect and insulate you all from any Form 700 conflicts of interest, travel payment issues. Fair enough.
Thank you for watching out for us on the compliance side. Very much appreciated. I think that part of the discussion is closed. We do have a discussion element, I think, that Vice Mayor raised about this concept that had been discussed, I think, last year in December for a variety of times, but I think it was in December in particular, there was a council meeting where there was an expectation that once a year, council would reevaluate council compensation, much like we evaluate employee compensation and the like. I don't remember seeing it in here. I don't believe that it's in there. Does anybody remember it being in there? Okay, so I don't think that it's in there. So I think that it would be, well, let me look down. So would you be interested, council members, in adding this concept of an annual reassessment of that compensation, much like we work with our city employees to reevaluate? I think I'm getting enough yeses that it's, let me say, does anybody object? Okay, nobody's looking at me to object, so I'm going to assume that there's no objection. So let's add that to part of our consideration, part of our update. With that in mind, so I was going to start going down my queue again, because I think we've covered all the pieces, but I want to make sure. So I'm going to.
Mayor Gonzalez, it's almost 10. So I was wondering if I can motion to extend for half an hour.
Please do.
Motion to extend for half an hour.
I'll second.
Thank you both for being vigilant. Can we please take a vote on that?
All votes are in. Motion passes 601 with Councilmember Simon absent.
So at this point in time, for that item of discussion interest in particular, was there anything else that was open there, Madam Clerk, that you wanted us to provide guidance on? Not on that item. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, because I've got a queue here, I'm going to go ahead.
I do want to clarify one thing. There was the discussion that was mentioned about staff registration. And so I just want to call out item C, where the language was added that city staff will facilitate conference registration and hotel accommodations at the conference site or approved conference hotel. Travel, which includes flight, rental car, Uber, etc. Accommodations must be booked by the council member or mayor in addition to any variations on hotel or other accommodation.
Council, I don't see any desire to change that language, so we will move.
Thank you.
Okay, so just going through my queue, I just want to make sure that if I need to clear the queue, I clear it. Otherwise, so I do have Vice Mayor next in queue. I don't know if that's related, that was related to your other item. Perfect. And then Councilmember Aguilar, was that with respect to extension or something else?
So I would like to go back to page 14, item B, section E. I just want to clarify this paragraph. Upon return from a conference or reimbursable travel, council members and the mayor must report out at the subsequent meeting a trip report, change and to or submit a written report to the city manager and city clerk to be included on the consent agenda and exclude at the second meeting in July.
I think that's a good catch. I'm thinking that that's a typographical error because it's a specific trip report as opposed to, was another place where we talked about the expenditures for the prior fiscal year.
Yeah, we need to strike probably that entire, would just say and or submit a written report to be included on the consent agenda. Get rid of it at the second meeting, and then we need to strike F. Because this is, or this is where it's asking for an annual report of all travel.
So I'll turn to my rules committee members here. So let's take one step back. Is this, I don't have my red line handy, is F, Frank, is that in addition? Somebody have the red line handy?
I know that that's an addition. I don't.
Because I don't remember that from before.
I would strike F.
We have any, is there a reason why we should have F in there? Now we've talked about you, city manager, printing that annual summary that was discussed. Just want to make sure that there's no confusion about council members re-reporting once a year, as opposed to this notion that was described about once a year we print out to the public.
That was the discussion at committee, was that once a year we would print out a report to show how much money was spent by each council member.
So I think there's been like some kind of mixing of the two. F does not accomplish the objective that you just described, as best as I can tell. So I would concur with Councilmember Aguilar that we strike F. Is there any objection to striking F? Seeing no objection to striking F, that would be the guidance. I'm not clear currently as I look through what I've got on my screen, whether this annual reporting is captured at another spot. Okay, so we will return with that concept unless there's an objection from the council. Just an annual report where the city says, okay, and this is what was spent. So that, you know, we have that transparency to the public in one location, one very specific time. People can see that report. Hearing no objection to that notion, it's a direction to staff.
So I want to, on that direction, you want staff to print an annual report and do what with it?
That would be, I think we had talked about it and it was summarized in the presentation by Madam Clerk, that we were going to once a year have a printed report attached to the consent calendar as a consent calendar item, where we would just make sure that there's an official record that's readily available to the public through the consent calendar mechanism. Okay. Councilmember Bowen, please.
To clarify, return from a conference or a reimbursable travel, is that what if, and then if we're going to then make a list of the city funded these trips, for example, I went to a conference that was partially, like a quarter of the flight was reimbursed and everything else was not. Would that still go on there? Would it be marked as a partial, like city funded activity?
City manager?
So few answers to that. So one, in order for you to receive reimbursement, you have to report out during the agenda item. So your report would verbally capture that. And then the report we would print at the end of the year is simply a report out of finance that would say, airfare reimbursement, $25. But it wouldn't say partial airfare reimbursement, if that makes sense, because it's going to be very accounting like that report.
Okay, so on this item, this big block specifically here, do you have the guidance that you need? Okay, let's move on. I think we have one more. Two more. That was it. Okay. Any final thoughts on our handbook? Seeing none, I'll close this discussion item. Thank you. I know it was a little bit long, but it does guide what, kind of how we operate. So thank you for your attentiveness. Thanks for everybody's willingness to work together to get to a good place. So at this point in time, I know we'll come back with the official final version of the code. We can still entertain a motion, or is that moot at this point? Is moot?
It is moot. We will bring the item back for the 17th.
Perfect. Okay, so let's move on to our next agenda item. A council request to schedule agenda items. Do I have any? Seeing none, I'll close that and move to item 15, City Council reports, please. Councilmember Bowen.
I just would like to report that on June 22nd and 23rd, I attended a Power and Policy Conference in DC for New American Leaders. It was as a New American and somebody that is a first in some respects. It was really empowering to be in a room full of firsts. And I think that, being in this room, it is not lost on me how important representation matters. And so it was really interesting to attend workshops that were really focused on coming up with creative ways to address housing, for example, through the lens of putting immigrants and BIPOC communities at the center of policymaking. I also really appreciated learning about how to engage with and mobilize communities that are often disenfranchised or newer, like your Gen Z constituencies, because they are a robust and very influential group. And then, one of the other, it was just be able to be there and being able to take a deep dive into policy in a different way. And so it was really an inspiring conference to attend.
Any other reports at this time? Seeing none, I'll close that item and move to adjournment. It is currently 10:09 and we are adjourned.